Hello, 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 everybody. We should be live. Let's see. We should be live on both YouTube and on Twitch. Here we are. Yes, we are. Okay, cool. So, yeah, we were gonna... I wasn't sure. We had an extra Thursday. Normally, I'd only do one reading analysis stream per month, but decided to double up this time. I didn't have anything else prepared. I mean, I suppose I could have jumped back into the Hobbit game, but this is working for me. All right, very good. Let's go ahead and let me just get the word out that we're live here. I know it's a little bit early, but that's okay. So I announced 7:30, and it's actually 2 minutes to 7:30. But well, it's better to be a little bit early than a little bit late, and it's not like I'm going to start the reading right away. Some days when I'm streaming just regular daily streams, I find myself starting slightly late. So it was good to not have that happen today. Let's see, I'm going to move this over here so that I can see both chats at once. Okay. And I have more than enough water today. Hopefully I don't have to get up very often. Well, I don't usually get up during these sort of things. It's like my body is like, well, you're reading Tolkien, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Oh, I should get, hold on, I know what I should get. Hey there, Kurt. How's it going? Dang, but I type fast. Oh, you heard me typing there? Yes, I actually am quite the accomplished typist, actually. Around 120 words per minute. I'll be right back. I just want to grab something here because I wanted to show you guys something. Well, one I can't show you because I don't have it with me, but the other I can. Hey, Alice. I'm not wearing a green shirt this time, so I'm not being all keyed out there. I forgot about that last time when we were doing the Hobbit, the Hobbit for GameCube. So I'll show you. Let me message Laurel too because I'm sure she might want to check this out. Where are you, Laurel? Speaking of Laurel, that's why I went to go grab. She sent me something. Here we go. So, hey, Moogle. So my friend Laurel, she's a fellow Tolkien scholar, and I talked about this recently. She got banned off of Quora, which is ridiculous. I was like, why would you get banned from Quora? You didn't do anything wrong. And she told me she didn't know why. There's a whole lot of her content, thousands and thousands of articles gone in the span of a moment, and that she couldn't, she was told that she was banned. And I was just like, I can't imagine what you could have done, So I spoke to the people at Quora, and they told me it was a mistake and that they reinstated her within a few hours, and it's going very well, Alice. And all her content was restored, and she decided as a thank you to send me a little gift, which she actually sent me two things. One was the big mug that I showed off not too long ago on Twitch, which it's just a giant mug. Like I have a big mug here. This is a really big mug. This is my big mug. I have normal size mugs, and this is a big mug, which is green, so it's kind of glitchy there. It's bigger than this, and it's the Lord of the Rings, and it's got the Fellowship on it. It's a very beautiful mug that I've been using for ice cream. But that was something that she also sent one to Sid, and she sent one to Matt, and in 2 weeks when we do the our special episode, actually, we have a special episode of the Council of Tolkien coming up, which I'm going to explain in just a bit. We're all going to have our mugs ready to do sort of a toast, you know. And that was for 1 year of the Council of Tolkien. But she sent me this as a thank you for helping her out with the Quora problem. And so I finally have a physical copy of J.R.R. Tolkien's translation of Beowulf, which is really wonderful. I own this only digitally previously. And, you know, you might think this is quite a thick book. Beowulf's not such a long story, but that's not all that's there. I mean, there's quite a large preface, but the Beowulf section of the book is about that much. And then there's notes on the text. There's commentary. You know, this is really good. Just a scholar's dream. A lot of commentary, you know. And then you get Selleck Spell as well. So just really cool. You're getting the new laptop tomorrow. That's exciting to hear, Alice. That'll be great. You've been without a real, you know, computer for so long, having to exist only on your phone. For those of you who don't know, on the YouTube side of things, my moderator, Alice, who has the name William Stone on YouTube, their whole apartment complex burned down. It was terrible, terrible. You know, obviously they're okay, but they lost so many things, and you know, have had to move, obviously, and have been existing on the internet on a phone this whole time. Speaking of phones, this is another thing I wanted to talk about. I had a nice chat with Lexi from Quora today, because I'm on the Quora Slack group, and they, you know, I have the app. Slack is something I've never used before. I was, you know, like Discord and stuff, but Slack is like business Discord, you know. But anyway, I got on there, but I wanted to get it on my phone so that I can keep up with things when I'm not at the PC. And for some reason, I couldn't quite get into it correctly, and I've been trying on and off, and finally I said, hey, are there any Quora employees who would be willing to take some time if you got a few minutes to help me out with this? And I felt very dumb, because it's like, you know, usually I'm the one helping someone set something up on their phone, you know, not the other way around. For me not to be able to do this, I just felt like I must be, you know, just missing something. And, you know, and she came on, and I showed her what the problem was, and she's like, I don't know, maybe just change your password. And that actually fixed it. I changed my password, and somehow that fixed it. And, you know, because whenever I tried to click join, it wouldn't say anything. It would just say error, try again later. And so she said, yeah, that's weird. Slack was giving you no useful error messages that would lead you in the right direction. And it was a stab in the dark for her to say, try to change your password. Somehow that got me in there. So now I can keep up with the goings-on at Quora on my phone. Because as much as I'm at the PC, I'm probably on my phone more. The other thing I mentioned, so in 2 weeks we're going to have the Council of Tolkien. That is the 5th of June. And it is going to be a special episode. It was actually supposed to be... well, actually, no. Hold on. I'm confused now. Did Sid want to do it in July, or... I'm a little off on this. Sid might have wanted to do this in July. Slack was forged in the fires of Mount Doom for the Mordor School of Business Management. You hate that thing. Yeah, I don't think it's a very good app, but it's what they use at Quora, and I don't mind having it, you know. All right. Okay, so this is, yes, we're moving that. Okay, so no, it's a normal episode. But the episode after that, in July 3rd, I believe, is going to be a very special episode. It was supposed to be in June, but Sid wanted me to move it. Paper Moon? Oh, okay, I haven't seen that in a long time. So anyway, what we're going to do, we want to do this sort of like twice a month, is instead of having it where I have a topic and Sid has a topic and Matt has a topic and we spend a half hour discussing all three, which is going to be most episodes. We're going to every 6 months, twice a year, do something where we all discuss one topic for the entirety. So that's going to be really cool. And I have a really special one planned for December when we get there. We're going to recast The Lord of the Rings. The three of us are going to sit there and pretend that we've been put in charge of a new movie adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, and we're going to go through all the logistics and the casting and everything. It's going to be I wanted to do it in December, first of all, because it gives the three of us plenty of time to prepare, and also because all of the films came out in December. I think there might have been one that was like late November, but I think all of, if not most of, if not all of the films came out in Crossfire Tolkien edition. Oh, I used to watch that show back in the day on CNN, but it got tiresome after a while because the bickering was too much for me. But Crossfire. We're gonna pretend that we're put in charge of a new thing where we're going to make 6 movies out of the Lord of the Rings, and it's going to be wonderful. And here's who we want to be, and we're going to go through a whole rigmarole with that, and that's going to be in December. Like all the films always come out in December. If you noticed, they should bring it back. I think we don't talk about politics on here, but I will say that if they brought back that show, and the only thing that they could do to get me to watch it again is if the participants had weapons. And I don't mean like guns or anything, but let's just give them some like Nerf bats or something, and they could just clobber each other, I just want to see somebody just like, I've had enough of you, and they're beating the heck out of the other guy, right? Ugh. Instead of, we'll have a gladiatorial debate, right? William Shatner from Star Trek era, original series era, playing every role in The Lord of the Rings. And welcome in, Teppo. Okay, so I'm of the opinion, I don't think Shatner's a bad actor. I just think that he usually plays himself, which is fine. There are a lot of great actors that played themselves. But I think that if we had that like sort of 1960s Shatner, he would have made a good Boromir. You know what I mean? He would have made a good Boromir back then. He grew his hair out or something, I do like Star Trek quite a bit too, so I immediately thought of like all the great, as soon as you said that, all the great fight scenes that he did in Star Trek, all the weird, sort of judo that he would do, and yeah. You shall not pass up this airline deal on Priceline. Priceline.com. Thank you for that, Kurt. That was good. And the glasses are, on the right side. They're dirty. Let me fix them. I'll fix them. Clean them. We'll start reading in just a bit. We'll start reading and analyzing and doing all that stuff. Oh, so you might have noticed, for those of you who are members, that the previous stream that I did of The Hobbit, the video game, is not available to watch on YouTube. I was going to edit it into chunks for each level. I had a bit of a copyright dispute, and I'm working out how to handle this, because not with the people who made the video game. It's the strangest thing. Hello there, War Master Painting. Perfect, nice. He did whip. Yeah, they had such, and Chewie, welcome in. They had such great, amazing fight scenes in Star Trek, and not that Star Trek was about fighting. They had to put all that in there to appease the network, who wanted an action show, but they did a good job with it, you know. So I had the most bizarre copyright dispute that I've ever, and I'm no stranger to copyright disputes on YouTube. I've had many of them, and I always come out on top because I know copyright law very well. And what happened was, so there was the live broadcast, that the last one we did last Thursday, where I played The Hobbit for GameCube, and we got through like 2 or 3 levels, and I was planning to edit it into chunks to upload as separate videos, so I made the live broadcast private. And I got a copyright notice from a company that has nothing to do with The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or Sierra Entertainment or anybody that had anything to do with that game, stating that I used some sort of song that was some sort of like, cinematic movie song, and I think it just must have sounded similar because it was this sort of automatically detected thing. And when this happens sometimes, when something has a similar melody, and it was a part where I was doing the puzzle with the barrels, and putting the barrels in the right place to open up the door. And there was a part where I wasn't talking much, and I guess that's where it detected the melody and thought that I was playing something from some movie that I've never heard of. And I sent I basically rejected it, and I just walking into Mordor. No, that would only work if he does the Fatboy Slim Weapon of Choice dance all the way to Mordor. That would be the greatest thing ever. No. Anyway, I fought back, and basically when that happens is they kind of automatically side with you, and they send it to the claimant, and the claimant has to see it and say whether or not that it's a valid claim. And 9 times out of 10, they see it's not a valid claim because it's not the same song, and it is fair use anyway, even if it was, because I'm doing an educational program here. And but no, they declined. They said that it's valid. So my next course of action would be to appeal this decision, and then they would have to prove that they're going to take me to court over this matter, or they would be, the video would be reinstated. But then I realized this is pointless. This is stupid. I'm not going to sit there fighting this battle because it's a private video that nobody is seeing. It was a one-time broadcast that I'm going to edit into separate videos and upload for the channel. And I realized, so what's going to happen is I'm going to upload that part, and it's going to get copyright dinged, and I'm just going to mute that part. So I'm not even talking in that part anyway, because I don't want to sit here and restart the whole process over and over again. That's like very silly. So I'm just going to edit that part where the music doesn't play in that part, and I'll upload it. So, because like I said, if I win this, then I'd have to do it all over again the second time around, and this reminds me of on my gaming channel. I had this ridiculous thing with a company from Japan called Square Enix, and they were trying to claim my video and block it because it had the ending to one of their games, and they don't want people online to watch the ending because they figure if people can see the ending, they won't buy the game, which is ridiculous. That's so silly. So I won the copyright dispute, and then I played the game a second time later on, and I went through the same exact thing. So that was interesting, But like I said, I'm no stranger to copyright disputes on YouTube, and I've been through it many, many times, and I always win. But in this case, I'm sort of backing down, not because I think I'm wrong, but because it's too much of a hassle for a private video that nobody's seeing, and then I'd have to go through it a second time, and I don't have the time for all that, so we're not going to do that. Christopher Walken is Frodo. No, I have some really good casting thoughts in my head, but I want to hear what Matt has to say. Now, Sid has admitted to me that he doesn't really know modern actors as well as me or Matt would know, so he wants to take more of a technical sort of look at this, and like I said, we're just basically going to pretend that we've been put in charge of a new, like, let's make the Lord of the Rings as 6 pictures, and let's cast everybody and do all this. Could you please not do that? Don't do that. Don't do that, Aruna. What is the point of this? Is there a point to what you're doing? Alice, could you... Don't do that. That's so silly. Thank you. What are you doing? Oh, who does that? That's so silly. Just say hi. Just be normal. But anyway... Yeah, people used to do that, like, in the internet, like on AOL, and AOL would, like, log them off. They said, you've been logged off for scrolling. If you type too fast, you just started, like, mashing like that. Just sending a bunch of periods. Well, okay. Where's the book? Where's the Fellowship of the Ring? There it is. We're going to get started in just a moment here. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. So there will be a part of last week's stream when it's uploaded as videos that's going to be muted, and that's going to be me doing that just to prevent this silliness from happening again. Because it's really not worth my time, or really anybody's time, to dispute that sort of nonsense. Avery Brooks as Saruman. This is a no ellipses song. Actually, the actor that I personally would choose for... I like Avery Brooks, by the way. He was a big part of what made Deep Space Nine so interesting. But the actor that I had in mind specifically for Saruman is actually Willem Dafoe. I think that he would be really good at that role. But yeah. Avery Brooks certainly has the excellent voice for it. There's no doubt there. Maybe we can find a place for him somewhere. But let's go ahead. I'm going to kill the music here as soon as I find the tab. Oh, it's right here. There we go. And Rowan Atkinson is Gollum. I don't know about that. Like I said, I would. We're trying to make it a little more serious, but that's funny though. I'm not super familiar. I'm not like a Mr. Bean fan. I'm gonna go over here. Oh, you're not saying it would be good. It would just be fun. I got you. Okay. So, I believe, and anybody who was here last time, and hey Santa Cruz, how's it going? For the Shire, indeed. Sorry that I didn't see you right away. I was dealing with somebody in the other chat who was spamming. We did the Mirror of Galadriel, right? That's where we left off. We finished the Mirror of Galadriel. I believe we did that. So, I didn't get to really talk too much about that scene last time because we were in a rush to end the stream. But the Mirror of Galadriel is a scene that I love in the book, and I love it in the Ralph Bakshi film, and I tolerate it in the Peter Jackson film. And I'm not really saying that the Peter Jackson film is bad. I just think that he got that scene wrong. The special effects were not needed. Galadriel didn't need to be yelling like that, and her voice didn't need to be distorted because she wasn't trying to scare Frodo. She was trying to just tell him the same thing that he had been told already by Gandalf, is that these very wise, very powerful, and most importantly, very good people that are in the world, like Gandalf or like Galadriel, aren't necessarily better suited for the job just because they're taller than Frodo, older than Frodo, wiser than Frodo, and more powerful than Frodo. He's the guy for the job. And then Gandalf, he said it to him, he would find a reason to use the ring. And I'm not talking about putting it on his finger. and vanishing. I'm talking about using it for its intended purpose, the domination of others, and that Gandalf would be sorely tempted to do so when he did not trust himself to do so. And there's a great conversation that will happen, not in this book, but in the Return of the King, between Gandalf the White and Denethor, where he talks about how he doesn't trust anybody with the ring, really. He trusts Frodo with the ring, though. And Galadriel, her whole thing is she doesn't trust Frodo with the ring. She doesn't really trust anybody with the ring. She thinks this guy is going to fail and that Sauron is going to regain the ring. She's sort of thinking a little bit like Boromir, but she's a lot smarter than Boromir. She's much, much older than Boromir. I mean, she's 8,000 years old. She's been around the block a few times. And what she realizes is that if Frodo fails, Sauron regains the ring. She has to take hers off. She wears one of the rings herself. Her ring is called Nenya. And she can no longer use Nenya, and this is going to make her realm much more vulnerable to the forces of evil than it was previously. But if he succeeds and destroys the ring, then her own ring will lose its magic, because all of the rings are bound to the one, not just a few of them. They're all bound to it. It's one ring to rule them all. Even if Sauron wasn't around for the creation of Nenya, Vilya, and Narya, they're still made with his magic, his source code, so to speak. They're all running the same operating system, and if it goes down, it all goes down, right? That's a good way of looking at it. And so she's thinking the only way that she could be rid of Sauron and still keep her realm the way it is if she can find some fault in Frodo, find him unworthy of this quest, and take the ring from him. And he surprises her by just playing the biggest Uno reverse card that he possibly could have, without even realizing that he was doing so. He says he will give it to her if she asks. He doesn't hold it out. He doesn't try to hand it to her like he did with Gandalf. He practically begged Gandalf to take it. He tried to hand it to Aragorn. In this case, he's not trying to thrust the ring into her hands. He's saying, if you ask me for it, I will give it to you. And she's sort of like, wow, I was trying to judge you and you've judged me. And you've judged incorrectly in a way, because you're judging me worthy and I'm really not. And she decides that the ring is in the best possible hands that it can be, in this sense, that Frodo really is the guy for the job and that Gandalf really did know what he was doing. And she realizes at this point that she has passed a test that is not even from Frodo, it's really from the Valar, and that she can return to the West now. And she will remain what she is. She will not become the Lord of the Rings. And she was not trying to scare him when she told him all of what would happen if she had the ring. She was acknowledging a truth about herself. It's not something that should have been a forceful sort of scene and a stern warning to Frodo, but really Galadriel realizing something very important about herself in a sort of melancholic way. So that's where we left off. And we get that great scene with Sam. He looked into the mirror of Galadriel and he saw trouble back at the Shire, and then he was tested too. He was tempted because he had the opportunity to turn around and go back and set things right, to prevent things that might happen in the Shire, that in fact will happen in the Shire, that are very bad, from ever happening. But he decides to stick with Frodo anyway. But I love the line where he says, if that happens, someone's going to catch it hot, which just is a great line. Sometimes people don't really, because studying literature is such a serious business and everything's so stodgy and formal and everything. We don't talk about how funny Tolkien is. And there's so many great, very funny lines in the books. I mean, I'll tell you my favorite. It had already passed. It was in one of the very first chapters. I think it was the first chapter, actually, when Lobelia Sackville Baggins comes to bother Frodo, and she doesn't even get to see him. She's sort of put out by Merry, and Merry's was sort of acting like as a barrier there between her and Frodo. And she sort of yells at him that he's not really a Baggins. She's more than he's more than half Brandybuck, and she storms off, which is very hypocritical because she's a Brandybuck. She's only Baggins by marriage anyway, and her husband has died, so she's not really a relative of Frodo so much as that she's an in-law, and the person that tied them together in that is passed on at that point. But anyway, I love it when Merry turns to Frodo and he says, "Did you hear that?" Or no, Frodo turns to Merry and says, "Did you hear that?" She says, "I'm a Brandybuck," because Merry is, of course, he's Merry Brandybuck, and Merry says, "It was a compliment, and therefore untrue." Now, I'm going to do something that I've never done here, but I'm going to offer a prize here. I have this whole list of Steam keys that I have here that I've been giving away as part of a promotion on my gaming channel. But I'm going to give one away right now. Well, I'm possibly going to. Now, let's try to agree. No Google, no Tolkien Gateway, no wikis. I'm not looking for someone to do research on this. Okay? I'm looking for the first person who knows it, and I will give one of these games away randomly to the first person in chat who can tell me what was Merry called in the early draft of The Lord of the Rings. Before Tolkien decided on Meriadoc Brandybuck, the shortened form Merry, he had a different name. And I want to see if anybody knows it. Anybody that knows it, I'm going to give them a free video game here. For example, I will give you some other examples. In the early... Hello, WT. In the early... Yeah, isn't that a great line? It's my favorite line from Merry. In the early version, Frodo was called Bingo, actually. He was Bingo Baggins. So, here's an example. Aragorn, or Strider, was called Trotter. So there are these early examples. No, it wasn't Bob, although that would have been pretty amazing. Merry had a different name early on. There were 6 hobbits in the very first draft of The Lord of the Rings. There was Fatty, there was Bingo, there was Pippin, there was Sam, and there was the one that would become Merry, and who am I forgetting here? I guess Bilbo. If anybody knows it. No, Trotter was Aragorn. Tanzania. No, it wasn't Tanzania. No, Trotter was Aragorn. Although, Trotter, you could see where Trotter become Razumir. No. I'm not looking for like a Westron sort of name. I'm looking for what the name as it would have appeared in the text before he was called Merry. Not that what his Merry or Meriadoc was translated from. So I'll just give it another minute. If nobody gets it in a minute, I'm going to say, and then we'll move on here. All right, I'll give you a hint. It does start with M. It is another M name. Yeah, and they do all have alternate sort of names. For example, Sam is known as Ban, or Samwise is Banazir. That's his real name, though. That's his name as it would have been said in the Westron language. It was translated to English as Sam or Samwise. And what's interesting is that Tolkien did not even want to call him Gamgee. Gamgee was something it was his second choice. He wanted the original surname that he wanted was Goodchild. And he thought the idea that he got in his head was there is no way Christopher would let me do that. He's going to make a big stink about Goodchild, and so I'll change it to Gamgee. Alice got it. It was Marmaduke. I thought you might know that because I know that you had the history of Middle-earth at some point, and didn't you say that you had like the 3-volume set or something, and that it was stolen from you? Which is horrible. All right, let's get you a game here. I have to update the the spinning wheel here because I've added games to it. All right, let's spin the wheel and see what you've won. It was Marmaduke. That is correct. So you have won a copy of... That's the real name of a name. It's called You Suck at Parking Complete Edition, which is just a heck of a title for a game. I think that's like Clam Digger, right? Like, let's remove that from the list. I'm gonna send that to you on Discord, okay? All right, that's sad. So you won our little contest there. I thought you might. I was kind of hoping somebody would just know it, and but I know that you read the history of Middle Earth, so let me take that off of my list as well. You Suck at Parking Complete Edition, which sounds pretty amusing. All right, let's get to it. So we're starting with Book 2, Chapter 8, Farewell to Lorien. That night the company was again summoned to the chamber of Celeborn, and there the lord and lady greeted them with fair words. At length Celeborn spoke of their departure. Now is the time, he said, when those who wish to continue the quest must harden their hearts to leave this land. Those who no longer wish to go forward may remain here for a while, but whether they stay or go, none can be sure of peace, for we are now come to the edge of doom. There are those who wish may await... Let's try that again. Here those who wish may await the oncoming of the hour till either the ways of the world lie open again, or we summon them to the last need of Lorien. Then they may return to their own lands, or else go to the long home of those that fall in battle. There was a silence. They all resolved to go forward, said Galadriel, looking in their eyes. As for me, said Boromir, my way home lies onward and not back. That is true, said Celeborn. But is all this company going with you to Minas Tirith? We have not decided our course, said Aragorn. Beyond Lothlorien, I do not know what Gandalf intended to do. Indeed, I do not think even he had any clear purpose. Maybe not, said Celeborn. Yet when you leave this land, you can no longer forget the great river. As some of you well know, it cannot be crossed by travelers with baggage between Lorien and Gondor save by boat. And are there not the bridges of Osgiliath broken down and all the landings held now by the enemy? On which side will you journey? The way to Minas Tirith lies upon this side, upon the west. But the straight road of the quest lies east of the river, upon the darker shore. Which shore will you now take? If my advice is heeded, it will be on the western shore, and the way to Minas Tirith, answered Boromir. But I am not the leader of our company. The others said nothing, and Aragorn looked doubtful and troubled. All right, I am going to pause here now. And, yeah, exactly, W2. That's exactly what happened. So it's actually a subject of great debate. What was Gandalf's original plan? Obviously, he did not plan to die. That was not something that was going to happen. He really didn't think that would happen. He didn't plan to go through Moria at all. He planned to go over Carithris. Now, his plan always involved going to Lothlorien. It is of my opinion that Aragorn is completely correct, that Gandalf didn't have a plan beyond getting to Lothlorien, and that he was going to put his head together with Celeborn and Galadriel and figure out what is the best way to get into Mordor. Because we always wonder, what route would he have taken if he was able to guide Frodo all the way to Mount Doom? Would he have taken the route that they did, the pass of Cirith Ungol? Would he have found a way through the Black Gate? Would he have led them through the Black City of Minas Morgul, or did he know of another path? We can't know this, and I think that Aragorn is 100% correct, that he was going to get there, and he was going to figure it out as he goes, and possibly get the wisdom of Celeborn and the wisdom of Galadriel to make a plan. I see that you do not yet know what to do, said Celeborn. It is not my part to choose for you, but I will help you as I may. There are some among you who can handle boats. Legolas, whose folk know the swift forest river, and Boromir of Gondor, and Aragorn the traveller. And one hobbit, cried Merry. Not all of us look on boats as wild horses. My people live by the banks of the Brandywine. That is well, said Celeborn. Then I will furnish your company with boats. They must be small and light, for if you go by water there are places where you will be forced to carry them. You will come to the rapids of Sarn Gibber, and maybe, at last, to the great falls of Rauros, where the river thunders down from Nen Hithuel, and there are other perils. Boats may make your journey less toilsome for a while, yet they will not give you counsel. In the end, you must leave them and the river and turn west or east. Aragorn thanked Celeborn many times. The gift of boats comforted him much, not least because there would now be no need to decide his course for some days. The others, too, looked more hopeful. Whatever perils lay ahead, it seemed better to float down the broad tide of Anduin to meet them than to plod forward with bent backs. Only Sam was doubtful. He, at any rate, still thought boats as bad as wild horses, or worse, and not all the dangers that he had survived made him think better of them. All shall be prepared for you, and await you at the haven before noon tomorrow, said Celeborn. I will send my people to you in the morning to help you make ready for the journey. Now we will wish you all a fair night and untroubled sleep. Good night, my friends, said Galadriel. Sleep in peace. Do not trouble your hearts overmuch with thought of the road tonight. Maybe the paths that you each shall tread are already laid before your feet, though you do not see them. Good night. The company now took their leave and returned to their pavilion. Legolas went with them, for this was to be their last night in Lothlorien, and in spite of the words of Galadriel they wished to take counsel together. For a long time they debated what they should do, and how it would be best to attempt the fulfilling of their purpose with the ring. But they came to no decision. It was plain that most of them desired to go first to Minas Tirith, and to escape at least for a while from the terror of the enemy. They would have been willing to follow a leader over the river and into the shadow of Mordor, but Frodo spoke no word, and Aragorn was still divided in his mind. His own plan, while Gandalf remained with them, had been to go with Boromir, and with his sword help to deliver Gondor, for he believed that the message of his dreams was a summons, and that the hour had come at last when the heir of Elendil should come forth and strive with Sauron for the mastery. But in Moria the burden Gandalf had been laid on him, and he knew that he could not now forsake the ring, if Frodo refused in the end to go with Boromir. And yet what help could he or any of the company give to Frodo, save to walk blindly with him into the darkness? So, Mr. Bean is Sean Bean. Yes, Matt, that's correct. Sean Bean. That is a Mr. Bean that's in The Lord of the Rings. There you have it. So, really interesting here that he says that he personally interprets the dream. Now, it said, his dream, but that was actually referring to Boromir's dream. So I'm going back to that part here, because Boromir's dream was that a voice spoke out of the west and basically read a riddle, and it was actually delivered first to his brother Faramir twice, before the third time they both received the dream. And Aragorn is taking this poem, this little riddle, as being, this is it, this is finally the time when I'm going to become the king and I'm going to save the world. And so I'm going to read you that again. Seek for the sword that was broken, in Emladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken, stronger than Morgul's spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand. For Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand. So, of course, Aragorn is greatly concerned with the first part, seek for the sword that was broken. And he had the sword that was broken, Narsil, reforged as Anduril. Okay, so let's read what Teppo here said. In my mind, Gandalf's plan is heavily influenced by Eru, First before he entered the world, and second time when he died and was sent back. Eru knew what would happen and instructed Gandalf. That is true to an extent that absolutely when Gandalf died, he was plucked from the world by Iluvatar or Eru or God or whatever you wish to call him, and that he was given very specific instructions before being sent back. But what I'm talking about is Gandalf the Grey. Previously, when he left on this journey and he agreed to be their guide, I don't think he had a plan beyond getting to Lothlorien as to what his plan would be to get into Mordor. And like I said, I believe that Iluvatar, God, he's behind a lot more than people think. I think he was the one that sent the storm to Carathras to prevent them from taking that route. They had to go through Moria. And not just because of Gandalf dying and then being instructed and being empowered and replacing Saruman as the head of the wizards and the head of the White Council, but because of Gollum, because Gollum is the most important character in The Lord of the Rings. There's no doubt about that. Gollum is the key to the story from the beginning to the end, even though he hasn't yet appeared. Well, he's sort of been there. You know, I mentioned that a lot of the sounds that Frodo heard when they were in Moria was Gollum. He saw his eyes, and we're going to get a lot more of that. He's not in Lothlorien. He's sort of lurking around the outskirts, but as they go down the river, he's going to be following them, and Frodo will not be the only one aware of it. Aragorn will become well, actually, Aragorn's already aware of it, but they're actually going to talk about it. But what's really interesting is, like I said, it's all Iluvatar's plan, and it has to happen a certain way, but Gandalf didn't know about it. Gandalf, remember I said this earlier, Moria wasn't his first choice. It was the plan that he had after all the other plans fell through. So he had to even be sort of nudged in that direction, I think. Gandalf, to me, is he's a very interesting character. He makes plans a lot, but there are certain things that he doesn't plan. He is operating on faith a lot, which I think is what you're getting at there, Tepper. He does operate on faith more often than any other character, I think, except for perhaps Galadriel. All right, let us continue now. I shall go to Minas Tirith, alone if need be, for it is my duty, said Boromir. And after that he went silent for a while, sitting with his eyes fixed on Frodo, as if he was trying to read the halfling's thoughts. At length he spoke again, softly, as if he were debating with himself. If you wish only to destroy the ring, he said, then there is little use in war and weapons, and the men of Minas Tirith cannot help. But if you wish to destroy the armed might of the Dark Lord, then it is folly to go without force into his domain, and folly to throw away. He paused suddenly, as if he had become aware that he was speaking his thoughts aloud. It would be folly to throw lives away, I mean, he ended. It is a choice between defending a strong place and walking openly into the arms of death. At least that is how I see it. Frodo caught something new and strange in Boromir's glance, and he looked hard at him. Plainly, Boromir's thought was different from his final words. It would be folly to throw away what? The Ring of Power? He had said something like this at the council, but then he had accepted the correction of Elrond. Frodo looked at Aragorn, but he seemed deep in his own thought and made no sign that he had heeded Boromir's words. And so their debate ended. Merry and Pippin were already asleep, and Sam was nodding. The night was growing old. In the morning, as they were beginning to pack their slender goods, elves that could speak their tongue came to them and brought them many gifts of food and clothing for the journey. The food was mostly in the form of very thin cakes, made of a meal that was baked a light brown from the outside, and inside was the color of cream. Gimli took up one of the cakes and looked at it with a doubtful eye. "Cram," he said under his breath. And he broke up a I need to drink water. One moment. I apologize. "Cram," he said under his breath, and he broke off a crisp corner and nibbled at it. His expression quickly changed, and he ate all the rest of the cake with a relish. "No more, no more," said the elves, laughing. "You have eaten enough already for a long day's march." "I thought it was only a kind of cram, such as the Dale men make for journeys in the wild," said the dwarf. "So it is," they answered, "but we call it lembas, or whey bread, and it is more strengthening than any food made by men, and it is more pleasant than cram by all accounts." "Indeed it is," said Gimli. "Why, it is better than the honey cakes of the Bjornings, and that is great praise, for the Bjornings are the best bakers I know of. But they are none too willing to deal out their cakes to travellers in these days. You are kindly hosts." "All the same, we bid you spare the food," they said. "Eat little at a time, and only at need, for these things are given to serve you when all else fails. The cakes will keep sweet for many, many days, if they are unbroken and left in their leaf wrappings, as we have brought them. One will keep a traveller on his feet for a day of long labour, even if he will one of the tall men of Minas Tirith." Let's talk about the lembas. Well, let me catch up on chat here, and then we'll talk about the lembas here. Let's see. Back to school, Mr. Bean. Nice. Okay. Let's talk about the lembas. So, lembas is interesting because when Tolkien wrote his first draft of The Lord of the Rings, he looked back at it and he said, "It's quite the Catholic tale." And this was not something that he actually intended. He did not set out to write something specifically Catholic or of any sort of religion. He just sort of realized it's quite the Catholic tale. And in it, he had one reference that is very explicit, and it is the lembas bread. The lembas bread is sort of a representation of what we would call the Eucharist, which the Catholics believe is the body of Christ. Now, I always thought that was kind of funny that he said that, because I always thought of it more of from Exodus, that it's like manna, sort of the perfect food from heaven. But I digress. I'm not going to argue with Professor Tolkien. He says it's more like the Eucharist, and it's more like the Eucharist. But anyway, what's really interesting here is the history of it. Now, it doesn't go into the history of it here. They just said that it's magic, basically. The elves made it, and if you eat one, you could walk for a day or do a day of hard labor. It replaces, 3 full meals, or maybe for hobbits, 6 full meals. But if we look into the history of it, through other books, we know a lot more. So I'll tell you a little bit of the history of lembas bread. It was really only ever used in one other story, which is the fall of Gondolin, and it was in the very last draft that he was working on when he died, which was originally published in Unfinished Tales as Of Tur and His Coming to Gondolin, which is the first part of a very detailed, full novel version of the fall of Gondolin that he was working on, that ended right when Tur came to Gondolin and walked through the 7 gates. So, and it's really wonderful. It's some of his very best writing, like even better than the Children of Húrin, although just like I said, unfinished. It just stops at one point. Now, and in that story, there's a little bit more about lembas and specifically a little bit more about how the magic works. And what one of the elves said here is that it's meant for them to eat when all else has failed, when they have no food left. And this is really interesting because it's explained further in the final version of The Fall of Gondolin, the final unfinished version of it, that the magic actually works best when you have no other food. If you're eating it with other food, it's kind of good. But if you're just basically, this is all you have and you're sustaining yourself on only lembas, that's when the magic is in full effect. Now, they are cakes made from a silver corn that was indigenous to the Undying Lands. Now, when I say silver corn, I'm not talking about the sort of American corn, maize, and it's usually yellow kernels. We do have it in white or silver kernels as well. I'm not talking about that. When Tolkien said corn, he's talking about any sort of cereal grain. and that it was indigenous to the Undying Lands, and it was brought over by some of the elves who crossed over to Middle-earth via the Helcaraxa, which Helcaraxa is an elvish word that means the grinding ice. It was basically the polar ice caps. Although the world wasn't round at that point, it was a thin sort of strip of constantly changing, jagged ice that they were able to cross to get to Middle-earth. It's also the way that Morgoth got to Middle-earth, and Ungoliant as well. Anyway, I digress. It was brought there by, and it's interesting because the art of making lembas is known only to a specific sect of elvish women. Elvish men are not allowed to know the secret of lembas. Mortals are not allowed to know the secret of lembas. It's only elvish women, and they are called the Yalvanaldil, which is basically the children of Yavanna. They're not literally her children. They're the children of Iluvatar, but that's what their sect is called. And so we can say that this magic actually comes from the Valar because it is something that Yavanna would have come up with, and she taught it to them. And that Galadriel either already had the knowledge when she came over, or she possibly learned it in Doriath from the likes of Melian. And what's interesting here is Gimli mentions something really cool. He talks about how the honey cakes of the Bjornings are some of the best baked goods that he's ever had in his life, and this is even better, and that's high praise. But he mentions the Bjornings are not very willing to share their food with others. Now, obviously, they have been willing to share it with Gimli at some point, probably because his friend Gloin was a friend of Bjorn himself. But they don't often give it out. And the elves, too, they don't actually like giving mortals the lembas bread, because a lot of them held this belief, and I don't think Galadriel thinks this way, but a lot of elves do think this way, that if mortals eat too much lembas, they're going to start to think that they're elves, and that they're going to want to sail to the west and try to become elves. And I think it's because of Tur, because Tur was starving and he had lembas and he became an elf. You know, he sailed to the west and he's the only mortal to ever become an elf. So I think that possibly they believe that it was because of the lembas. I would argue that it's absolutely not. It's coincidental. But, you know, people come up with these sort of wacky beliefs even in real life. So there you have it. I don't agree with your idea, Tom, that Gandalf is clueless. There's nothing clueless about him. He does use his knowledge and his experience to make wise decisions and understand. You do have to remember that he was hampered greatly by Saruman the White, who he believed was the wisest of all. Of course, Saruman was quite foolish himself. Wasn't Turin given some lembas? He absolutely was. And he didn't wish to become an elf. And I also love that story. If you've ever read of Turin is coming to Gondolin, there's actually a moment where Tur and Turin, who are cousins, they don't necessarily meet, but they see each other briefly. And it's this sort of like little crossover between the fall of Gondolin and the children of Húrin, which are, you know, happening at, you know, kind of the same time period here. To simulate eating a bunch of lembas, eat raw instant potato mash powder. I wouldn't even do that for anything. And then drink some water. Yeah, that might simulate the the cram. I don't think it would simulate lembas. The lembas is supposed to taste good. So, well, I don't know where you're getting 15,000 years from. Gandalf likely arrived in Middle-earth in the year 1000 of the Third Age, so it's more like 1500 years. And I don't know what you think that Gandalf did that was not wise. I really don't understand that. I don't know where you're coming from that. Pro wrestling, when I was very, very young, I watched some of it. I even went to a match with my dad once. He had free tickets, you know, and I saw that. But it was never something that I watched regularly, you know. Not really so much of a fan of that. You know, it's interesting because it does seem like something. It's like these guys are like basically like superheroes, beating the snot out of each other, and it's so melodramatic. But I just never really got very deeply into that. But yeah, I don't know what it is that you think that Gandalf did wrong. He's sort of the architect of all this stuff too. And I don't know where you're getting 15,000 years from. That's not true. All right, let's continue here. Hey, no problem, Joe. Welcome to stream. The elves next unwrapped and gave to each of the company the clothes they had brought. For each they had provided a hood and cloak, made according to his size, of the light but warm silken stuff that the Galadrim wove. It was hard to say of what color they were. Grey with the hue of twilight under the trees they seemed to be, and yet if they were moved or set in another light they were green as shadowed leaves, or brown as fallowed fields by night, dusk silver as water under the stars. Each cloak was fastened about the neck with a brooch like a green leaf veined with silver. "Are these magic cloaks?" asked Pippin, looking at them with wonder. "I do not know what you mean by that," answered the leader of the elves. "They are fair garments, and the web is good, for it is made in this land. They are elvish robes, certainly, if that is what you mean. Leaf and branch, water and stone. They have the hue and beauty of all those things under the twilight of Lorien that we love. For we put the thought of all that we love into all that we make. Yet they are garments, not armor, and they will not turn shaft or blade. But they should serve you well. They are light to wear and warm enough or cool enough at need. And you will find them great aid in keeping you out of sight of unfriendly eyes, whether you walk among the stones or the trees. You are indeed high in the favor of the lady, for she herself and her maidens wove this stuff, and never before have we clad strangers in the garb of our own people." Now this is interesting. Now, see, that's not true, Tom. You have to read the books. I think you have to stop here and read the books. It did not take him 50 years to figure out that the magic ring was a magic ring. First of all, Bilbo did not initially tell anyone that he had a magic ring. It took Gandalf quite a while to get it out of him. And secondly, he told him that magic rings could be very dangerous, and that he ought to be careful with such a thing, and he was concerned with it almost immediately. But then he went, as he does, to Saruman, and he asked him about the possibility of the One Ring being found. And Saruman told him that it's impossible, that it can't happen, because he knows that the One Ring was washed out by the Anduin River out to the Bay of Belfalos, and it's lost forever in the ocean. And Gandalf believed him because he believed that Saruman was good and wise. But he became increasingly more nervous when Bilbo didn't age. And even then, he reasoned that Bilbo, his family line, has a history of longevity. And his grandfather, Gerontius Took, was the longest-lived hobbit ever, lived to 130 years of age. But it was when Bilbo became overly possessive of the ring, that's when he had a problem. He always knew it was magic, and he feared that it was a ring from Eregion, possibly one of the lesser rings. He said he hoped that it was one of the lesser rings. He feared it may be one of the greater rings. And you also have to understand that to a being like Gandalf, 50 years is not a long time. But it wasn't 50 years, so that should be mentioned. It was closer to 78 years. That he always knew it was magic, but it took him a while to verify that it was the One Ring. Does answering similar questions become boring? Sometimes it does, and sometimes it does not. I get tired of certain questions like, why didn't they just ride the eagles? That's ridiculous, you know? You say, yeah, Tom, you don't know what you're talking about. You should actually read. You should actually read the books, especially the Silmarillion. But then you would know that he wasn't placed in Middle Earth by God, and he wasn't put there specifically to fight the guy who made an evil magic ring. Gandalf was there with Sauron. They came at the same time. It took Sauron thousands and thousands of years to come up with the idea of evil magic rings. So yeah. That's not true. Yeah, I would recommend that you read the books. Or if you don't want to read them, I recommend that you rewind back to when I first started reading these to you with my analysis and my commentary, and there you'll have me reading them to you instead. So let me address what Joe asked, because sometimes you get the same questions, and some of them are very tiresome, like why didn't they just ride the eagles to Mordor? That would have been easier. There was a great clip of Tolkien. It wasn't actually Tolkien, but it was somebody who did a very accurate impression of his voice and his mannerisms. It said that he was in the pub and some guy came up to him who was a big fan of The Lord of the Rings and asked him, why didn't they just take the eagles and ride the eagles to Mordor? That would have been much easier. And he said that I said to him what I always say when people ask me that question, which is, shut up, and which I think is funny. There's so many reasons, and his actual answer to that was that the Eagles are not a taxi service. But anyway, you can dispute it all you want. Like I said, you're wrong, but you can be wrong if you'd like to be wrong. But like I said, you should read the books, because I think you either haven't read the books or it's been quite a while. I think, well, when was the last time you actually sat and read The Lord of the Rings? I think it's been a while, if at all. But anyway, there are some questions that I do get tired of, and I usually just ignore them. However, or I'll try to pass them off to somebody who might be better suited or at a better temperament to answer the question. However, there are some questions that I'll answer multiple times, and it doesn't get boring, because as I learn, because I'm not here just to teach, I'm here to learn as well. As I learn, I find other sort of avenues. So I'll be able to come at an answer from a different avenue than previously, So that's sort of my way of thinking. Like, for example, in episode 110 of the Q&A show, which I just put up yesterday for members, and it'll be there for everybody next week, I tackled the whole idea of the Blue Wizards, and I know for a fact that I had already done a segment on that on YouTube in my very first episode about the Blue Wizards. But sometimes it's better to come at that was over 2 years ago at this point, or close to 2 years ago. So yeah, I wouldn't like your dinner. Well, you could tell me what it is. I wouldn't mind, telling it. Strap the ring to a stone and use a catapult. See, See, that's what Sauron would want, because then it would probably become lost, and somebody would find it that he would like to find it, like an orc or something, I mean, I've heard all sorts of things. Why didn't they put it in an envelope? Why didn't they tie it to a chicken? That sort of thing. I know for a fact that I also recently revisited the envelope thing. Mushroom risotto. I thought it might be mushrooms. I thought it might be, when you said I wouldn't like it. I think mushrooms are haunted. There are evil spirits in mushrooms. But hey, if you like them, you like them. You can eat all the evil spirits you'd like. But yeah, sometimes I'll have like an alternate way of going at the same question. Or sometimes it's just been so long, and I you have to put yourself in this mindset that the person that asked you last month is not the same as the guy that's asking you right now. So, and not everybody's going to sit there and read 6,000 articles on Quora or watch hundreds of hours of content on YouTube, Is potato pancake bacon? Oh, potato pancake bacon. Yes, and let's make sure we keep the language PG for YouTube. Thank you. Okay, so Tom, to answer you to what the Rings of Power. Let's talk about that very briefly. The Lord of the Rings of Power on Amazon Prime has a little bit to do with the books. A little bit to do in the way that they are telling a story that Tolkien wanted to tell. He didn't tell it in exactly that way. They use events from the books, but they're very hampered by not having the rights to all of the books. So it's important to note that a lot of the stuff in the movies and in the cartoons that have been made, and the video games, and as well as the TV show is just made up. And I'm not saying there's anything really wrong with that, but I'm saying that, Gandalf didn't fly down from a meteor. That didn't happen. That happened in the TV show. He also didn't not know his name, or who he was or anything like that. So there is that as well. The meteor thing was pretty weird. I have to admit. I like the second season. The first season's a little weird. I mean, I got through it, though. One day we'll do some sort of deep dive into the Rings of Power, but that day's not today. Anyway, let's continue here. Oh, I wanted to talk about the paragraph I just read. Okay, so once again, Pippin asks, are these magic cloaks? And the elf says, I don't know what you're talking magic. Because to elves, magic that's what the bad guys do, right? That's Sauron, Morgoth stuff, necromancy, that sort of thing. They're like, and I love this guy. He says, oh, they're just good clothes, They'll keep you warm, they'll keep you cool, they'll hide you, they're like natural camouflage. He doesn't even realize they're magic to somebody like a hobbit, All right, let's continue. After their morning meal, the company said farewell to the lawn by the fountain. Their hearts were heavy, for it was a fair place, and it had become like home to them, though they could not count the days and nights that they had passed there. As they stood for a moment looking at the white water and the sunlight, Haldir came walking towards them over the green grass of the glade. Frodo greeted him with delight. I have returned from the northern fences, says the elf, and I am sent now to be your guide again. The Dimril Dale is full of vapor and clouds of smoke, and the mountains are troubled. There are noises in the deeps of the earth. If any of you had thought of returning northwards to your homes, you would not have been able to pass that way. But come, your path now goes south. As they walked through Caras Galadon, the green ways were empty, but in the trees above them many voices were murmuring and singing. They themselves went silently. At last Haldir led them down to the southward slopes of the hill, and they came again to the great gate, hung with lamps, and to the white bridge. And so they passed out and left the city of the elves. And then they turned away from the paved road and took a path that went off into a deep thicket of mallow trees, and pressed on, winding through rolling woodlands of silver shadow, leading them ever down, southwards and eastward, towards the shores of the river. They had gone some 10 miles, and noon was at hand, when they came to a high green wall. Passing through an opening, they came suddenly out of the trees. Before them lay a long lawn of shining grass, studded with golden Eleanor that glinted in the sun. The lawn ran out into a narrow tongue between bright margins. On the right and west the silver lode flowed glittering. On the left and east the great river rolled its broad waters deep and dark. On the further shores the woodlands still marched on southward as high as the eye could see. But all the banks were bleak and bare. No mallow lifted its gold-hung boughs beyond the land of Lorien. On the banks of the silver lode, at some distance up from the meeting of the streams, there was a height of white stones and white wood. By it were moored many boats and barges. Some were brightly painted and shone with silver and gold and green, but most were either white or grey. 3 small grey boats had been made ready for the travellers, and in these the elves stowed their goods. And they also added coils of rope, 3 to each boat. Slender they looked, but strong, silken to the touch, grey of hue like the elven cloaks. "What are these?" asked Sam, handling one that lay upon the green sward. "Ropes indeed," answered an elf from the boats. "Never travel far without a rope, and one that is long and strong and light. Such are these. They may be a help in many needs." "You don't have to tell me that," said Sam. "I came without any, and I've been worried ever since. But I was wondering what these were made of. Knowing a bit about rope making, it's in the family, as you might say." "These are made of hithlane," said the elf, "but there is no time now to instruct you in the art of their making. Had we known that this craft delighted you, we would have taught you much. But now, alas, unless you should at some time return hither, you must be content with our gift. May it serve you well." "Come," said Haldir. "All is now ready for you. Enter the boats, but take care at first." "Heed the word," said the other elves. "These boats are light-built, and they are crafty, and unlike the boats of other folk. They will not sink. Lade them as you will, but they are wayward if mishandled. It would be wise if you accustomed yourselves to stepping in and out, here where there is a landing place, before you set off downstream." Okay, I'm going to put this to rest here, Tom. I just answered it like 10 minutes ago. He was not sent out to a world based entirely on magic rings. I told you that all of the angels, all of them, Gandalf, Saruman, Sauron, Morgoth, Yavanna, Namo, Ermo, Ase, Uinen, even the weird ones that you've never heard of, they all came into the world at the same time. Sauron started making rings much, much, much later. And I already explained all of that. I already explained it. So I don't know why you're sitting there saying, in over 10 years, you've never given a solid answer. I just gave you all the answer you've already needed. And I'm going to ask you what my moderator already asked you, to drop it, because that's not the topic at hand right now. Okay? We're not doing that right now. If you want to submit a question through Quora, I'll give you quite an answer there. But right now, we're not going to talk about that anymore. I already told you all about that. But I don't think, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think you're here to listen. I think you're here to just talk. And I'm going to recommend that you do less talking and more listening. The company was arranged in this way. Aragorn, Frodo, and Sam were in one boat, Boromir, Merry, and Pippin in another. And in the third were the Legolas and Gimli, who had now become fast friends. In this last boat, most of the goods and packs were stowed. The boats were moved and steered with short-handled paddles that had broad leaf-shaped blades. When all was ready, Aragorn led them on a trail up the Silverlode. The current was swift, and they went forward slowly. Sam sat in the bows, clutching the sides and looking back wistfully to the shore. The sunlight glittering on the water dazzled his eyes. As they passed beyond the green field of the Tongue, the trees drew down to the river's brink. Here and there golden leaves tossed and floated on the rippling stream. The air was very bright and still, and there was a silence, except for the high, distant song of larks. They turned a sharp bend in the river, and there, sailing proudly down the stream toward them, they saw a swan of great size. The water rippled on either side of the white breast beneath its curving neck. Its beak shone like burnished gold, and its eyes glinted like jet set in the yellow stones. Its huge white wings were half lifted. A music came down the river as it drew nearer, and suddenly they perceived that it was a ship, wrought and carved with elven skill in the likeness of a bird. 2 elves clad in white steered it with the black paddles. In the midst of the vessel sat Celeborn, and behind him stood Galadriel, tall and white. A circlet of golden flowers was in her hair, and in her hand she held a harp, and she sang. Sad and sweet was the sound of her voice in the cool, clear air. I sang of leaves of gold, and leaves of gold there grew. Of wind I sing. A wind there came, and in the branches blew. Beyond the sun, beyond the moon, the foam was on the sea, and by the strand of Ilmarinen there grew a golden tree. Beneath the stars of Evereve in Eldamar it shone, in Eldamar beside the walls of elven Tirion. There long the golden leaves have grown up the branching years. O Lorien! Oh, I skipped a part. While there beyond the sundering seas now fall the elven tears. O Lorien, the winter comes, the bare and leafless day. The leaves are falling in the stream. The river floats away. O Lorien, too long have I dwelt upon this hither shore, and in a fading crown have twined the golden Eleanor. But if of ships I now should sing, what ship would come to me? What ship would bear me ever back across so wide a sea? All right, let's talk about some of this. Now, the first thing interesting is they first see the ship as an actual swan. Now, we know a lot of the elves like to build ships that look like swans. Swans are incredibly important to their culture. And this is part of my vast argument that I've been making that Tur of Gondolin was an elf. Obviously, he was born a mortal man. But Tolkien did write that he was counted amongst the Eldar in the end, and that he became immortal. And it was 7 swans that guided him to the sea, the first man to reach the sea, and the only man to meet one of the Valar, except for the unfortunate ones that met Morgoth. And he met Ulmo, and he was basically Ulmo's chosen champion. Ulmo, I think, is the wisest of the Valar. Obviously, Manwë is the one in charge, and Namo Mandos, he's probably the most intelligent. But as for pure wisdom, there's 2 of them. The wisest of the male Valar, in my opinion, is Ulmo, and for the ladies, it would be Yavanna. Oh, I'm sorry, not Yavanna. Nienna. Yavanna is very wise as well, but Nienna, I would say, is more important. But anyway, what's really, really cool here is the number 7, very important in not only Elvish cultures, but all the cultures in Middle-earth because of, and we talked about this when we were reading back in Bree, the Valakirka, the constellation, the 7 stars, the Wain, the Bear, the Big Dipper, all the different things that it's called in all the differing cultures in Middle-earth and in the Undying Lands. Durin's Crown, 7 stars, probably the same constellation. And then the swans. And it was mentioned that Tuor loved swans, and that's weird because if you've ever been around a swan, they're nasty. They're not nice birds. They're like, imagine a goose that has worked out and bulked up and has roid rage as well. That's a swan. Swans they're beautiful to look at, but boy, you do not want to be near a swan. And then these swans bowed before Tuor and they adored him and they led him to the sea, So that's part of it. That's really cool. Then Galadriel, this is really cool. She's wearing a crown of golden flowers. And what's interesting is we've talked about this a little bit before, not here on a stream, but Galadriel's name means maiden with a crown of golden flowers. And that was the name that was actually given to her by Celeborn, her husband. She had other names. She was called Nerwin. What was the other name? She had 2 names. Nerwin is man maiden, and then she has another name that means like noble maiden. And no, actually, that's Arwen. Arwen is noble maiden. Nerwin is man maiden, and then she has another one that means something similar to noble maiden. And in the Elvish tradition, you get 2 names. You get the name that your father gives you right when you're born. Your father will give you a name, and then a few years later, your mother will give you a name that's more based on your personality, at least thus far. And then sometimes you take a 3rd name, which is sort of an epesse. An epesse is just a really, really fancy word that means nickname. And it's sort of a name that you may take yourself or that somebody may give to you that you're going to decide to go by. And in this case, it's Galadriel. And my friend Laurel, we talked about her earlier. She's the one that sent me this copy of Tolkien's Beowulf. But she, a while back, I was offering services of translating people's names into Elvish, and she's like, do me, and I said, well, Laurel is referring to a garland of flowers, and I said, it's Almariel. And I said, but if you were deciding to go with specifically golden flowers, your Elvish name would be Galadriel. And she says, oh my God, I've always wanted to be Galadriel ever since I was a little girl, but I think I'll stick with Almariel. I don't want to take the name of an existing character. So it's interesting that here we see her literally wearing golden flowers. Of course, when Celeborn came up with this, he was just referring to her blonde hair. And what's interesting is that Celeborn's name, which is Silver Tree, and of course referring to his silver hair. Now, here's where it gets funny, because Celeborn is a Quenya name, and it's interesting. Well, why would he have a name in Quenya when his name, he's a Sindar elf? Well, because his name in Sindarin is Teleporno, which it means the same thing. Telep is silver, just like Telperi and the silver tree of Valinor. But it sounds funny because Teleporno and people are like, oh, that's an interesting name. So it doesn't get really talked about that much. Now, to answer Teppo's question here, the Undying Lands are really, really big. And you have to remember that a lot of it is uninhabited. And also that the elves don't have quite the same, we'll say, drive to procreate that they used to. They, early days, they would have these big families of 4 children, 5 children, or someone like Feanor having 7 children. And that was unusual, for him to have 7. But it became much less over time. It was usually 1 at a time, they're immortal and it grows and everything. But at the same time, the Undying Lands are really, really big. Remember that there was a place for Ungoliant to hide in the Undying Lands, that there was a ravine that she could crawl into, and that not even Manwë could find her there. So I could see that it becoming potentially a problem after a while, after a very, very, very long while. But you have to remember that they could literally just make it bigger. Numenor was created because Osse, one of the Maiar, one of the most powerful Maiar, but still not even one of the Valar, he raised it up off of the ocean bed. He created that whole continent of Numenor. And when they wanted to have a place to build a city, the elves themselves were able to raise up a mountain. They were able to pool their powers and do that. So the Undying Lands are really big, and they can get bigger if needed. So there is that. And they're always going to want to make it bigger, because they're not only going to want to have more room, for new elves and such, but they want to have places where there's nobody. They want to have places where there's animals, and places where there's gardens and there's scenery and that kind of thing. So they could literally just make it bigger, is what I'm getting at. Now, the poem here, this is really interesting. The song that she sings is really her farewell. She's saying goodbye to Lorien. She's saying goodbye to Middle-earth. She's not going to leave just yet, but she knows she's on her way out at this point. Hey, Deborah, I'm glad to have you. I've seen your comments. The elves live in tiny one-room apartments because they ran out of room. Now, I don't think that they would put up with that. Elves... Yeah, I don't think they would do that. It's a funny thought, though. Like I said, they could make the Undying Lands bigger as needed. I mean, like I said, just one angel was able to raise up Numenor, and that was a very big continent. Not as big as the Undying Lands, but pretty big, All right, let's continue here. Aragorn stayed in his boat as the swan ship drew alongside. The lady ended her song and greeted them. "We have come to bid you our last farewell," she said, "and to speed you with blessings from our land." "Though you have been our guests," said Celeborn, "you have not yet eaten with us, and we bid you therefore to a parting feast here between the flowering waters that will bear you far from Lorien." The swan passed on slowly to the height, and they turned their boats and followed it. There, in the last end of Egladil, upon the green grass, the parting feast was held. But Frodo ate and drank little, heeding only the beauty of the lady and her voice. She seemed no longer perilous or terrible, nor filled with hidden power. Already she seemed to him as by men of later days elves still at times are seen, present and yet remote, a living vision of that which has already been left far behind by the flowing streams of time. Well, Feanor's not going to get out of the halls of Mandos until the end of the world. He's stuck there. He's so stubborn he won't repent until the world's about to end. That's how stubborn he is. Did I tell you folks about that one person on Quora? There was this lady that has fashioned herself as Feanor's daughter. Oh boy. This was pretty crazy. I got some pretty wild comments on Quora from somebody, and and other people were telling me, "Oh, it's this person. Here we go again." Because apparently she just goes from Tolkien scholar to Tolkien scholar, just annoying everybody with her thoughts. And she was bothering Matt, and she's now bothering Hilario, who's another Tolkien scholar on Quora, which I think is hilarious because Hilario doesn't really put up with that kind of thing. Yeah, she's a very, very normal person. Sounds like your ex Santa Cruz gamer. Oh my. Oh my. So, I wound up blocking her because she got very abusive very fast because we didn't see eye to eye, which is fine, but she became abusive. She thinks that everything is the Valar's fault and that Feanor, was perfectly reasonable in everything that he did, which, the Valar, certainly, they made a lot of mistakes, especially in the early times, but Feanor, man, I mean, that guy, mistake after mistake after mistake. And as a matter of fact, when Tolkien died, he was working on another revision of the Silmarillion where Feanor would have been even more evil, just even more terrible than he already was. So, anyway, she became extremely abusive. She didn't ask me about bees. No, that's one of my favorite, I think, apocryphal story. So anyway, she got very abusive. I blocked her. And she actually found me on oh yeah, she does have issues, Deborah. That's what I'm getting to. She found me on Facebook. I got a Facebook friend request from somebody. It wasn't her name. Her name was something very normal, like Laurie or something like that. But then on Facebook, I got a friend request from somebody with an obviously Quenya name, and I thought it could just be somebody who's a big fan of the Lord of the Rings who found me on YouTube or Quora or whatever who wants to talk, And I looked at her account and I was like, oh no, it's her. And she was writing pages and pages and paragraphs of how, what a jerk I am. And she was claiming that I got her banned from Quora, which I did no such thing. And I even went to some of the people that I know at Quora and I said, could you look at this lady's account? I have her blocked, but she's saying she's banned and I don't think she is. And the head moderator at Quora, who's a wonderful person, looked at it and said, no, she's not banned or restricted in any way. So, yeah, Bjorn had bees, exactly. Nobody brought that up in the 6-hour debate, But anyway, probably because it was funny. I think it's an apocryphal story, but it's really funny regardless, because that is the sort of conversations that Tolkien scholars have with each other all the time. And we'll go on and on and on and on. Like me and Matt have spent hours on the phone just talking about Tom Bombadil, It's a good thing that we mostly agree. Imagine if we disagreed, then it would be a nightmare. But anyway, I was like, oh my God, she's crazy, because her whole account is that she's Feanor's lost daughter, and that the Feanorians are the greatest people in all the world, and that everything's really just the Valar's fault, and so I was just like, ugh, and I blocked her. But then she started sending more accounts after me and trying to friend me. So, it started with her, and then there Feanor, and then there was a Glorfindel. And so every time I see an elf on Facebook, I'm like, oh no, there you have it. Oh dear. But yeah, I don't know. She wanted to be Feanor's daughter, and I like the idea of like as a fan fiction sort of thing, of there being a lost daughter of Feanor. Maybe, but I don't know. Like it's kind of wild. Like she basically spends her entire time online defending this character that was meant to be seen as horribly flawed at the very least, horribly flawed, and if not outright evil, And people tend to think, well, he was the good guy. He was fighting against Morgoth, but Tolkien was making a very important point. And he made this point again and again and again in The Lord of the Rings, in the Silmarillion, in his letters, that you can be a bad person and not be literally in league with the devil. And he said those exact words, actually, in a letter that he wrote in the 60s to somebody who was an American filmmaker who was trying to work on a treatment for an animated version of The Lord of the Rings, and they were sending him all these like scripts and storyboards and stuff and asking for his opinion, and he didn't think very much of it. There was a scene, I guess, where it was implied in this possible film that never got made, where Old Man Willow was said to be a minion of Sauron. And Tolkien said, you could be malevolent and not be in league with the devil. Not that Sauron is the devil. Sauron knows the devil. He's good friends with the devil. He's not the devil himself. But he's making a good point. Just because Feanor fought against Morgoth does not mean that he was the good guy. And that's a point that's been made many times, that there are, Saruman, he was fighting against Sauron too, but he wasn't good. There was a time where he might have been good, but it's not right now. All right, let's continue onwards here. And thank you, Santa Cruz. Thank you for the kind words. After they had eaten and drunk, sitting upon the grass, Celeborn spoke to them again of their journey, and lifting his hand he pointed south to the woods beyond the tongue. As you go down the water, he said, you will find that the trees will fail, and you will come to a barren country. There the river flows in stony vales amid high moors, until at last, after many leagues, it comes to the tall island of the Tindrock, that we call Tolbrandir. There it casts its arms about the steep shores of the isle, and falls then with a great noise and smoke of the cataracts of Rauros down into Nindalf, the Wetwang, as it was called in your tongue. That is a wide region of sluggish fen when the stream becomes tortuous and much divided. There the Entwash flows in by many mouths from the forest of Fangorn in the west. About that stream, on this side of the great river, lies Rohan. On the further side are the bleak hills of the Emin Muil. The wind blows from the east there, for they look out over the dead marshes and the Noman lands to Cirith Gorgor and the black gates of Mordor. Boromir and any that go with him seeking Minas Tirith will do well to leave the great river above Rhoros and cross the Entwash before it finds the marshes. Yet they should not go too far up that stream, nor risk becoming entangled in the forest of Fangorn. That is a strange land and is now little known. But Boromir and Aragorn doubtless do not need this warning. Indeed, we have heard of Fangorn and Minas Tirith, said Boromir. But what I have heard seems to me for the most part old wives' tales, such as we tell our children. All that lies north of Rohan is now to us so far away that fancy can wander freely there. Of old Fangorn lay above the borders of our realm, but it is now many lives of men since any of us visited it, to prove or disprove the legends that have come down from distant years. So I want to talk about this very briefly. We're seeing sort of an inversion of the sort of normal interaction that Boromir usually has with people. Usually Boromir says something kind of wild, and then everybody tells him, no, that's wrong. That's not how it is. And in this case, it's Celeborn who's saying, hey, don't, that forest, there's something messed up there, don't go there. And Boromir's like, oh, that's probably nonsense. That's not, look. We've heard about it, but you know what? It's so far away that people make up all kinds of crazy stories, which is funny because in Rohan they're making up crazy stories about Lothlorien. In the Shire, they're making up crazy stories about anywhere that's not the Shire. And this is sort of the division that you see between everything and what Gandalf has been working against his whole time there in trying to bring everybody together again, trying to get the hobbits to see other lands, trying to get the elves and the dwarves to get along, trying to get the men and the elves and the dwarves to get along and such. All right, let me catch up on chat here a little bit. So here's the thing, Joe. I think, and I had a discussion not too long ago, with Sid Kemp, about arguing with people, and Sid will go through great pains to bring somebody to his side if he thinks that they're willing to listen and willing to learn, right? And he's willing to listen and he's willing to learn. But you have to recognize, like, when somebody is being malevolent, they're not usually willing to listen. They're not usually willing to learn. And it can become a great burden of what we, in the modern times, we call emotional toil of doing the work for somebody else. So Sauron and Morgoth sitting at a bar, sipping evil beer, snacking on evil peanuts. Now I want somebody to draw that. Is there anybody that's an artist that would be willing to draw that? But basically, like I said, like we had somebody in here not too long ago, and they might still be listening, and I wish them all the best and everything, who clearly was going by a limited understanding of Tolkien. They watched a little bit of the TV show. Maybe they watched the movies. They like I said, I don't think you've read the books or if you've read the books, it was maybe a long time ago, and they said they watched the TV show. And I'm not saying that anybody who comes to Tolkien through the movies or through the show or through video games or everything, we welcome them. But don't think that you have an understanding of it and that you can make this great argument based on those things. And I said, hey, I'm reading the book to you. Stop and listen for a while. Sometimes people, you have to realize that they're not willing to listen. And then, like I said, that lady that I was telling the story about, I blocked her because I have so many people to talk to. Everybody wants to ask me a question. Everybody wants to talk to me. And I have so much fun doing it. Why am I going to put myself through something, like with this person, when I can talk to you fine folk? Now let me read what Kurt here is saying. Do I recommend Morgoth and Sauron ever just hung out and talked shop? Like how much they actually coordinate when they were working together. Okay, so Morgoth is not the chatty type. I'll tell you that. Morgoth was pretty much like, get it done. I don't care how you do it. Get it done. That was his whole thing. And you have to realize that with Tolkien, as in real life too, evil is not cooperative. They will align themselves with each other if they think they can use each other. We see this with Sauron and Saruman. And this is going to be a big theme when we get to the Two Towers. They're not working together. They're not on the same side. As far as Saruman is concerned, he's doing the job that he was sent out to do. He's just doing it in a creative way. And as far as Sauron is concerned, this wizard is a complete jerk and just a complete fool who's going to make a mess of things, and let's let him go ahead and do that. He is what we would call a useful idiot. He's going to cause turmoil. He's going to make a mess out of Rohan, and that's going to benefit me. And that's the way that the evil characters think. They only band together when they think it's going to benefit them. So Sauron doesn't love Morgoth. Morgoth doesn't love Sauron. They might even hate each other. But they have goals. And Sauron thinks that Morgoth is a way to succeed at his goals, and vice versa. So that's what it is there, You can't imagine Sauron letting himself get micromanaged. That's very true. But like I said, Morgoth, I love that you use the word micromanage. Morgoth's not a micromanager. He says, get it done. I don't care how you do it, get it done. I want you to destroy this or to beat these guys or to ruin this thing. Because his whole concept is just evil. He's Satan. He's just evil for evil's sake, and he wants to cause strife and mischief and discord and all these other bad things. Sauron is the guy that wants everybody under his control. He's the micromanager. He's the one that wants to... He thinks he's the hero, by the way. Morgoth is the only being that knows he's not the hero. Sauron thinks he's doing the right thing. He's thinking, look at this chaotic world. I'm going to bring it to order. The only way I know how. And I've said many times that Sauron is basically a fallen angel with OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, if you've heard of OCD. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder, but people who have that know that they have it. They know there's something wrong with them. They have these compulsions to do specific things, and they know it's not normal, but they just can't help themselves. OCPD is a little different. They're wondering, why aren't any of you maniacs doing what I'm doing? Why didn't you close that door 10 times in a row? Don't you know terrible things can happen? Are you crazy? So that's Sauron in a nutshell. He would have really just benefited from some therapy, really. If he would have sat and talked to one of the Valar like Nienna or possibly Yavanna or Irmo or one of these guys, he might have gotten some therapy and he might have fixed himself, because he was created to be a lord of order. He was created to hate things that are chaotic. Did Narya play a part in Gandalf's healing of Theoden? See, now this is interesting because Gandalf didn't really heal Theoden. That's something that happened in the movie. And thank you, Sam, for joining the channel as a member. Welcome in, and thank you so much for becoming a member. I really appreciate you. Gandalf didn't really heal Theoden. Theoden healed Theoden. Now, the movie, they did a very different version of it, and it was really cool, where Theoden was just really old and decrepit and nasty looking, and then, and then he was being possessed by Saruman, and he cast him out, and then he went back to being, middle-aged man. And we'll talk about a lot more about this when we do the Two Towers. But Medio, you are making me laugh today. I'm finding it kind of hard to keep it together. You're a very funny fellow. That's good. What's funny is, though, I think of like the Roman gods, so I'm thinking to say Uranus, but I know what you're getting at there. I've lost my train of thought. Oh, Gandalf. So the one line that was in the film that was from the book was your hands would remember their strength better if they grasped your sword. Theoden was a very, very old man by the standards of his people. He didn't become younger. He wasn't under a spell. He was essentially gaslit. And if you don't know what gaslighting is, it's when you basically use sort of a very aggressive form of psychology to make somebody doubt their version of reality. And what Wormtongue did, and I'm sure he was coached by Saruman. Saruman didn't cast any spells on Theoden, but Wormtongue was convincing the king of something that he already thought a little bit deep down, and he was bringing out these insecurities that he was old, and he was weak, and he was decrepit, and he was becoming senile. And he started to really believe it, and he went into this state where he thought, I'm an old man who can barely stand up, and I'm going senile, and the end is near, and I'll just let Wormtongue do everything because he's young and strong, and he's got my best interest in mind. And once Wormtongue was removed, and he was able to hold his sword in his hand and realize that he was still strong, that was the true healing. Also, Alice, that's hilarious. Now, are you don't try to sell something. I don't know if that's a joke or what, but let's not do that, please. Now, what does the ring, Narya, actually do for Gandalf? Círdan said it best. It gives him comfort and warmth and stamina. See, Gandalf, I just actually wrote an article about his whole history. I'll be reading it out on YouTube soon enough. Gandalf, when he was incarnated, because he was a Loren, he was an angel. When he was incarnated, he became an old man. And it's not like all the wizards did that. Now, the way that Círdan described him is that Saruman was this tall, striking man with black hair. And then there's Gandalf leaning on his staff, and he's old. Now, by the time we get to the Third Age, they look enough alike that they could be mistaken from a distance, and Saruman took great advantage of that in the Shire, in Rohan, and in other places. That from a distance, people thought he was Gandalf. And there's only bit of black hair that was left was around his mouth and around his ears. And so basically, the ring stopped Gandalf from aging because he looks the same that he did in the year 1000 of the Third Age when he arrived. Now it's like the year 34, whatever the heck, and he still looks the same. Well, Saruman has now become old like he has, and Radagast has become old like he has. So basically, he saw the one guy in this group that chose a body of an old man, and he says if he's really going to do this job that he's sent out to do, he's going to need this ring because it's going to keep him warm on cold nights. It's going to keep him going when he should be too tired to go. It's going to give him the tools that he needs to do his job. So what it really does is it just makes Gandalf much tougher than he should be. That's why he's able to fight the way that he does. That's why he's able to travel the way that he does, even though he's in this very, very old body. No, I get you. I get you. Just let's not put any links in the chat, please, unless it's you ask first, okay? And I think you're a funny guy. I'm enjoying it. I just I was confused by that. Anyway, let's continue on. I've addressed a lot of chat stuff, but we need to continue along here. Because we have Farewell to Lorien. We also have a few chapters after that. We have the Great River, the Breaking of the Fellowship is the last chapter. I don't think we're going to finish today. Oh, maybe we will. Let's try. Let's try, right? There's not that much left. That means the next reading we can start the Two Towers, which would be exciting. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Oh, dear. Now Galadriel rose from the grass, and taking a cup... Oh, no. That's a little further along. I stopped with the thing with Boromir. Okay. So we should be... here. I myself have been a whiles in Rohan, but I have never crossed it northwards. When I was sent out as a messenger, I passed through the gap by the skirts of the White Mountains, and crossed the Isen and the Grey Flood into Northernland. A long and wearisome journey, 400 leagues I reckoned it, and it took me many months, for I lost my horse at Tharbad, at the fording of the Grey Flood. After that journey, and the road I have trodden with the company, I do not much doubt that I shall find my way through Rohan and Fangorn too, if need be. Then I need say no more, said Celeborn. But do not despise the lore that has come down from distant years, for oft it may chance that old wives keep in memory words of things that once were needful for the wise to know. Now Galadriel rose from the grass, and taking a cup from one of her maidens, she filled it with white mead, and gave it to Celeborn. Once again, this is mead, so there are bees. Now it is time to drink the cup of farewell, she said. Drink, Lord of the Galadrim, and let not your heart be sad, though night must follow soon, and already our evening draweth nigh. Then she brought the cup to each of the company, and bade them drink in farewell. But when they had drunk, she commanded them to sit again on the grass, and chairs were set for her and for Celeborn. Her maidens stood silent about her, and a while she looked upon her guests, and at last she spoke again. We have drunk the cup of parting, she said, and the shadows fall between us. But before you go, I have brought in my ship gifts which the Lord and Lady of the Galadrim now offer you in memory of Lothlorien. Then she called to each in turn. Here is the gift of Celeborn and Galadriel to the leader of your company, she said to Aragorn, and she gave him a sheath that had been made to fit his sword. It was overlaid with a tracery of flowers and leaves wrought of silver and gold, and on it were set in elven runes formed of many gems the name Anduril, and the lineage of the sword. The blade that is drawn from the sheath shall not be stained or broken, even in defeat, she said. But is there aught else that you desire of me at our parting? For darkness will flow between us, and it may be that we shall not meet again, unless it be far hence upon a road that has no returning. Now, just to talk, I always thought that this was a reference here to the matter of Britain, also known as Arthurian legend, and I think we see some Arthurian legend crop up from time to time in Tolkien's work. Indeed, I mean, he did some translations of Arthurian lore. Here I have one such example, which is mostly invisible because it's green, but that's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. He also had an unfinished translation of The Fall of Arthur, which I would have loved for him to have finished. Unfortunately, he did not. But I always thought that the magic sheath that she gives him, that's sort of a reference, I think, at least, to the sheath of Excalibur. Although the enchantment was different, because Excalibur's sheath, Merlin once spoke to King Arthur, and he said, would you rather have Excalibur or would you rather have the sheath that it comes in? And Arthur's sort of like, well, of course, the sword. Why? And he says, well, the sheath, though, is a very powerful magic, for he who carries the sheath shall not shed a drop of blood in battle. You will not be wounded. And Arthur says, well, that's wonderful, but I'd rather have both of them. So I always thought the magic sheath idea, even though it's a different sort of enchantment, might have been a reference to Excalibur here. And Aragorn answered, Lady, you know all my desire, and long held in keeping the only treasure that I seek. Yet it is not yours to give me, even if you would, and only through darkness shall I come to it. Yet maybe this will lighten your heart, said Galadriel, for it was left in my care to be given to you, should you pass through this land. Then she lifted from her lap a great stone of a clear green, set in silver brooch, that was wrought in the likeness of an eagle with outspread wings, and she held it up. The gem flashed like the sun shining through the leaves of spring. This stone I gave to Celebrian my daughter, and she to hers, and now it comes to you as a token of hope. In this hour take the name that was foretold for you, Elisar, the elf stone of the house of Elendil. Then Aragorn took the stone, and pinned the brooch upon his breast, and those who saw him wondered, for they had not marked before how tall and kingly he stood, and it seemed to them that many years of toil had fallen from his shoulders. For the gifts that you have given, I thank you, he said, O Lady of Lorien, of whom were sprung Celebrian and Arwen Evenstar. What praise could I say more? We have to talk about this stone. This is hugely important. The Elisar, the elf stone. And she said, take the name. And he does take the name, for when he becomes king, he is Aragorn the second Elisar tel Cantor. And if we break that down, Aragorn is king of men. Elisar, elf stone. Telkantar is a really cheeky sort of Sindarin word that he came up with. It means to bring forth across. It's the closest that he could come to Strider. Now, this elf stone, notice that when he pins it on him, they see him in a different way. He's tall. He's majestic. He's not Strider anymore. He's not as dirty as he was. He's not as disheveled as he was. They're seeing him in a different way, and this is part of the magic of the stone. This stone was made in Gondolin in the First Age by an elf, probably a guy by the name of Celebrimbor, the same guy who made some of the Rings of Power. And its magic was twofold. One, anybody who held it had healing powers, and this is hugely important for Aragorn because one of the prophecies in Gondor specifically is that the king will be a healer. And we're going to see that later on. The other power that it has is things that are old or withered or dead will be seen as new in the reflection of the gem. And that's why we're seeing Aragorn as sort of like he's like a whole new man at this point. Now, how did it get to be in Galadriel's hands? Now, there's sort of two ideas here. One is that this is a copy of the original stone, that Celebrimbor made a second one, and he gave it to Galadriel because he loved her. And that's one of the ideas that Tolkien had, and I don't really like that idea. The other idea that Tolkien had, and this is the one that I always go by, is that this is the original stone, and that it was Gandalf who brought it to Middle-earth when he came. And he gave it to Galadriel, and he told her, you will give this to the man who will reunite the kingdoms of men, and he will become the king. And she did give it to her daughter Celebrian, and Celebrian gave it to her daughter Arwen, and now Arwen has given it back to Galadriel. This is a gift from Galadriel, and it's a gift from Arwen. It's a gift from Gandalf, too. It's a gift from Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor, the grandson of Feanor, the only one of that family that was really a good guy, and the creator of some of the Rings of Power, he who resisted the torment of Sauron. And boy, when Sauron killed him, if you saw the TV show, that was pretty accurate, but it was so much worse in the book. I mean, he didn't just skewer him with a spear. He then used the spear with Celebrimbor's body on the end of it as a bludgeon to fight other elves. Now, that's pretty horrible to be made into a weapon like that. Your corpse to be flung around. Now, of course, he's not really dead. He's in the Undying Lands. He's probably, sipping tea with some of the elves over there right now. But that was still a pretty horrible thing to go through. Angels work, exactly. So, I always preferred the idea that Gandalf, especially that she says right here. I'm going to read what she said here again, because I think this is what hints to the fact that it was Gandalf that gave it to her. For it was left in my care to be given to you. That tells me all we need to know. Now, the other idea that Celebrimbor made it so that she could use it to keep her land the way that it is when in the time period that she couldn't use her ring, it helps explain a little bit of why Lothlorien was the way that it was when she didn't have the ring, or she had the ring but couldn't use the ring's power. But it doesn't match what she says here, and I always like the idea that there was one Elisar, not two. I don't like the idea of there being a copy of it. I think that he was trying to reconcile something, and unfortunately, he was working on a lot of things when he died, and the biggest thing on Tolkien's mind when he died was Galadriel. He was trying to figure out a way to make her as important to the Silmarillion as she was in The Lord of the Rings. He wanted to write an epic, amazing backstory for her and for Celeborn as well, and he just couldn't figure it out. And that's why in... where's that other book? Oh, there it is. In this book, which I took the dust jacket off because it was in really bad shape. I'm going to get another copy of this at some point. This is Unfinished Tales. There was a whole section called The History of Galadriel and Celeborn, and how there's like 3 different versions of Celeborn. Galadriel's story was never really figured out. Unfortunately, like I said, the Legendary is unfinished. The Silmarillion is unfinished. She was meant to have a very big part in the Silmarillion. But they couldn't quite nail down where did she meet Celeborn? Who is he really? Is he really Eluthingel's nephew, or is he a Falmari prince? Did Galadriel fight Feanor? There's all these crazy questions, So, Tolkien, he died, and we don't have enough life to finish all the grand things that we come up with. There's a wonderful little story, which is in this book, called Leaf by Niggle. Niggle is a little fella that... oh my god, we're getting raided by Scottish Maiden on the Twitch side of things. How are you guys going? It was the only allegory that Tolkien ever told. Now, I have to do the Gollum voice because we're getting raided here, so here we go.
The Scottish Maiden toast, give it to us raw and
So yes, this scene that we've just read. This is an amazing, important part of Aragorn becoming who he was meant to be, because he's already that guy. But now that he's pinned this stone to his breast, everybody is finally seeing him for what he truly is. How are you doing, Scottish Raid? Thank you. Scottish Raid, listen to me. Scottish Maiden, thank you for the raid. Okay, so let's continue onwards. Aragorn has gotten his gift. He got 2 gifts, actually. He got a really fancy sheath for Anduril, his sword, and the Elf Stone, which is really a gift from Arwen. Or we could say it's a gift from Celebrimbor, or we could say it's a gift from Gandalf. And it just so happens that Galadriel's the one giving it to him. But all the rest of the Fellowship are getting gifts of great majesty, so let's continue on with that. I don't think we're finishing this today, because I have so much to say about the gifts that she gives them. Especially Gimli. We have to talk a lot about Gimli, but let's get to that. The lady bowed her head, and she turned then to Boromir, and to him she gave a belt of gold. And to Merry and Pippin she gave small silver belts, each with a clasp wrought like a golden flower. To Legolas she gave a bow such as the Galadrim used, longer and stouter than the bows of Mirkwood, and strung with a string of elf hair. With it went a quiver of arrows. "For your little gardener and lover of trees," she said to Sam, "I have only a small gift." She put into his hand a little box of plain grey wood, unadorned save for a single silver rune upon the lid. Here is set G for Galadriel, she said, but also it may stand for garden in your tongue. In this box there is earth from my orchard, and such blessing as Galadriel has still to bestow is upon it. It will not keep you on your road, nor defend you against any peril, but if you keep it, and see your home again at last, then perhaps it may reward you. Though you should find all barren and laid waste, there will be few gardens in Middle-earth that will bloom like your garden if you sprinkle this earth there. Then you may remember Galadriel, and catch a glimpse far off of Lorien that you may have only seen in our winter, for our spring and our summer are gone by, and they will never be seen on earth again, save in memory. Now we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. So she gives him this box of earth and says, if you sprinkle this in your garden, it's going to be the most wonderful garden ever. There's also the acorn of the Malern tree that's in there, and that'll be, later, way later in the Return of the King. But this is the really big thing that she said. You have seen Lorien in the winter. You didn't get to see the spring. You didn't get to see the summer. Legolas talked a bit about what spring is like in Lorien. What is winter like in Lorien? Rather summer. But she said, our spring and our summer are gone by, and they will never be seen on earth again, save in memory. Now, why would she think that? Because she knows the end has come. This is it. She sang her farewell song. She didn't take the One Ring. She did not become the Lord of the Rings. She knows it's all over for her and for Lorien, and that she's going to pass to the west. She's going to go to the Undying Lands. She's going to be with her father, Finarfin, the king of the Noldor. She's going to be with her daughter, Celebrian, who she hasn't seen in a few thousand years. She's going to be with her uncle, Fingolfin, who is an amazing, amazing person. She's going to be with Turgon, all her cousins and everything. But Lorien, that's done. Because here's the thing. One of two things is going to happen. Either Sauron wins the war, and her realm is kaput because she can't use her Ring of Power anymore to keep it the way that it is, and she's going to have to flee. Or Sauron's going to lose, and the One Ring is going to be destroyed, and all the things made by the One Ring will so too be undone. And this means all the other rings of power are going to lose their power. They're just going to be fancy jewelry. And so she won't have the power to keep her realm the way it is. She's realizing the Third Age is coming to a close. She's saying goodbye. That's what her song was about. And hold on, Scottish Raid works too. Yeah. What were you streaming? Was it Morrowind, or were you perhaps playing a bit of Dragon Age, or what were you doing over there? I'm curious to hear it. Let's continue on as we do. Sam went red to the ears and muttered something inaudible as he clutched the box and bowed as well as he could. And what gift would a dwarf ask of the elves? Said Galadriel, turning to Gimli. Oh, you were playing Middle-earth Shadow of War. That's wonderful. Okay, I hope you're enjoying it. None, lady, answered Gimli. It is enough for me to have seen the Lady of the Galadrim, and to have heard her gentle words. Hear all ye elves, she cried to those about her. Let none say again that the dwarves are grasping and ungracious. Yet surely, Gimli, son of Gloin, you desire something that I could give. Name it, I bid you. You shall not be the only guest without a gift. There is nothing, Lady Galadriel, said Gimli, bowing low and stammering. Nothing, unless it is permitted to ask, nay, to name, a single strand of your hair, which surpasses the gold of the earth as the stars surpass the gems of the mine. I do not ask for such a gift, but you commanded me to name my desire. The elves stirred and murmured with astonishment, and Celeborn gazed at the dwarf in wonder, but the lady smiled. It is said that the skill of the dwarves is in their hands rather than in their tongues, she said. Yet that is not true of Gimli, for none have ever made to me a request so bold and yet so courteous. And how shall I refuse, since I commanded him to speak? But tell me, what would you do with such a gift? Treasure it, lady, he answered, in memory of your words to me at our first meeting.
and if I ever return to the smithies of my home, it shall be set in an imperishable crystal, to be an heirloom of my house, and a pledge of goodwill between the mountain and the wood, until the end of days."
Then the lady unbridled one of her long tresses and cut off 3 golden hairs and laid them in Gimli's hand. "These words shall go with the gift," she said. "I do not foretell, for all foretelling is now in vain. On the one hand lies darkness, and on the other only hope. But if hope should not fail, then I say to you, Gimli, son of Gloin, that your hands shall flow with gold, and yet over you gold shall have no dominion." All right. This is big. This is so big. We have to talk about this. And thank you, War Master Painting. I do enjoy doing the voices and such.
Especially Gimli.
But this is so big. So, in Unfinished Tales, it is mentioned that before Feanor came up with the idea for the Silmarils, he asked Galadriel for her hair. And as a matter of fact, it said that her hair, which looks like the light of the trees, was caught in it. And it was so beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. And he goes to his niece and he begs her for a tress, not for a hair, like Gimli said, not for 3 hairs, like some people say, but for a tress. A tress is a lot of hair. That's like a lock of hair. That's like this, you know? And she said no. And he asked her 3 times. He kept begging her for a tress, and she kept saying no. And some people ask me, why? Why wouldn't she just give it to him? He's the greatest craftsman of the elves. The only people in all of Middle-earth that are as good craftsmen as him, Sauron and Aula. That's it. Why wouldn't she give it to him? He's going to create something wonderful with it. And the answer is not in Unfinished Tales. It's not in the Silmarillion. It's right here. Right here in the Fellowship of the Ring. Firstly, she said, "No one has ever asked me something so bold and so courteous." We know that somebody else asked for her hair. Her uncle. He must not have been very courteous. He must have been pretty rude. He was a pretty rude guy. He was the most entitled, arrogant, self-righteous. I want to use a word I can't use on YouTube, but let's say it rhymes with drick. That's what he was, and she knew it. She didn't like him. She thought he was a big jerk, and she was right. And he didn't care much for her either. He just liked her hair. He just wanted to make it into something. And here's the other thing that Gimli said that's really important. Well, the other thing that Galadriel said, what are you going to do with it? And he said, I would treasure it. And if I ever get the chance, I'm going to set it into crystal. And this has got to be setting off friggin' bells and alarms and whistles in her head, because what did Feanor want to do with her hair? He wanted to put it into crystal. He didn't get that, so he just got some light from the 2 trees and put it in there. And he made the Silmarils. And what happened then? Terrible things. War, death, destruction, calamity, kinslaying, all over a bunch of gems. The War of the Jewels. The most horrible events in Middle-earth's history. And all because of these gems. Now, we're going to talk more about the Silmarils in a bit, because she's going to give Frodo his gift. But here's the thing. What did he do with the Silmarils before Morgoth stole them? And then all the elves started fighting over them. What did he do? He kept them in a fortress in Formenos. He kept them in a crystal casket in his house. He didn't let anybody else look at them. That was for him and him only. Whereas he's saying this is going to be an heirloom, and everybody's going to be able to look on it and say, wow, there is the true friendship of the elves and the dwarves once again rekindled. And it's not the first time that something like this happened. One of the Silmarils was taken off of Morgoth's crown by a guy named Beren. And this is, Sam's going to talk about this a lot later on in the 2 Towers. And because he wanted to marry Eluthingel's daughter, Luthien. And Eluthingel, the king of the Sindar elves, told him, if you can retrieve a Silmaril from the crown of the Dark Lord, you can marry my daughter. And he did it through great pain. I mean, he died and was resurrected. He lost a hand. So many things happened. There were werewolves and vampires and all kinds of crazy nonsense that happened, but he did do it. And he did marry Luthien. And their children and their children's children, that goes all the way down to Aragorn. But what's really crazy is that what did Eluthingel do with the Silmaril? He had some dwarves. There was this dwarvish necklace. It was called the Nauglamir. And he wanted to have the Silmaril, which was an elvish craft, set into the Nauglamir, which is a dwarvish craft, as a symbol of their friendship. And what did it lead to? He got murdered by the dwarves. And then those dwarves got killed by the Ents. And Luthien wound up with the gem. And then Yarindel wound up with the gem. But what's crazy about it, why did that happen? Because it was a Silmaril. Because these things, they're like the One Ring. You know, they're not evil. They're not good. Well, they're good because they're holy. They were hallowed. But they're not really anything. They're just jewels. They were hollowed by Varda so that evil hands could not touch them without being burned. That's why Morgoth wore them on his crown. But what we have here is somebody who attempted to do kind of the same thing, but because of the lust that the Silmaril gave to the dwarves, said, we'll do it for you, but our payment is we want the thing. And he's like, no, I'm paying you to make it for me. I'll give you money. I have money. And they're like, we don't want money. We want the thing. A whole fight broke out. They killed him. And that was the fall of Doriath, you know, and that's how a little thing can lead to a whole kingdom falling, like the One Ring leading to all this nonsense. But yeah, so this is huge. This is huge. So she's saying, you know, what are you going to do with it? He says, I'm going to put it on display for everybody to see as friendship of the wood and the forest. That's the elves and the dwarves. And that's why she gave it to him. That's why she didn't give it to Fëanor, because what would he have done with it? Kept it on his mantle, probably. All right, now let's continue on, because I have a lot to say about Frodo's gift as well. And by the way, thank you. Dutch is here. Hold on. Everybody say hi to Dutch in the YouTube side. Dutch is a fellow Tolkien scholar. He's really wonderful. He's actually the youngest Tolkien scholar that I have ever met, but he's got a very keen mind, and I would recommend that you go follow him on Quora. And I also wanted to say thank you to Rico, that you love when I have lots to say. Thank you very much for that. Dutch Patterson in the chat there. Very, very, very keen mind there. All right, let's continue on here. And you, ring-bearer, she said, turning to Frodo, I come to you last, who are not last in my thoughts. For you I have prepared this. She held up a small crystal phial. It glittered as she moved it, and rays of white light sprang from her hand. In this phial, she said, is caught the light of Erendel's star, set amid the waters of my fountain. It will shine still brighter when night is about you. May it be a light to you in dark places when all other lights go out. Remember Galadriel and her mirror. Frodo took the phial, and for a moment as it shone between them, he saw her again standing like a queen, great and beautiful, but no longer terrible. He bowed, but found no words to say. Oh, so there we have the... by the way, Dutch, people on Twitch side of chat are saying hi to you. The phial of Galadriel, people have asked me, what is actually inside there? And she actually just told you. But a lot of people miss that she said it's the water from Galadriel's mirror, not just the light of Eärendil. What is the light of Eärendil? Eärendil, a light in the sky, the brightest of the stars. We would call it Venus. It's not Venus, but we would call it Venus. It's actually an elf named Eärendil. It's Elrond's father flying through not outer space, but the region of space surrounding Arda, which is called Ilmarin, by the way, in a ship made out of mithril, and the light is one of the Silmarils, the same one that I mentioned, by the way, that caused the fall of Doriath. What happened to it after that? Like I said, Luthien wound up with that. She dies, her son Dior takes it. And then it winds up in Earendil's hands. And Earendil takes it to the Undying Lands. He uses it to get through this veil of mist and confusion that surrounds the Undying Lands, and he prays to Manwë. And this is where the whole idea of the scions of Earendil and Elwing, they were half-elves, but they were mortal. And they were told, look, you really shouldn't have come here, but we're going to let it slide. But you have to choose elf or man. And Earendil actually wanted to be a man. He wanted to be mortal, like his father was, like his grandfather was. But his wife, she was like, elf, sign me up for elf. And he didn't want to be separated from her, so he also chose to be an elf. And that's why Elrond had a choice, and why Elrond's brother Elros had a choice, and why Elrond's 3 children have a choice. Now, here's the thing. The Silmaril is in the sky, but that's the same light. So, she put it in a crystal, like Feanor did. It's not something that's so beautiful that it's going to cause kingdoms to fall. It's not hallowed by Varda, but it's sort of what I like to call a pseudo-Silmaril. And this is something that Sam's going to come to the same conclusion later on, and this thing's going to be hugely important in getting them into Mordor. All right, let's continue along. Now the lady arose, and Celeborn led them back up to the height. A yellow noon lay on the green land of the Tongue, and the water glittered with silver. All at last was made ready. The company took their places in the boats as before. Crying farewell, the elves of Lorien with long grey poles thrust them out into the flowing stream, and the rippling waters bore them slowly away. The traveller sat still without moving or speaking. On the green bank, near to the very point of the Tongue, the Lady Galadriel stood alone and silent. As they passed her, they turned, and their eyes watched her slowly floating away from them, for so it seemed to them Lorien was slipping backward like a bright ship masted with enchanted trees, sailing on to forgotten shores, while they sat hopeless upon the margin of the grey and leafless world. Even as they gazed, the silver load passed out into the currents of the great river, and their boats turned and began to speed southward. Soon the white form of the lady was small and distant. She shone like a window of glass upon a far hill in the westering sun, or as a remote lake seen from a mountain, a crystal fallen into the lap of the land. Then it seemed to Frodo that she lifted her arms in a final farewell, and far but piercing clear on the following wind came the sound of her voice singing. But now she sang in the ancient tongue of the elves beyond the sea, and he did not understand the words. Fair was the music, but it did not comfort him. Yet, as in the way of elvish words, they remained graven in his memory, and long afterwards he interpreted them, as well as he could. The language was that of elven song, and spoken of things little known on Middle-earth. I, Loria lantar lasi svernen, yene otanime, ve ramar aldaron, yene vailinte yuldar avanier, mi oromorde lisse murovaria. Andune pella vardo telamar, nu luine yasin, tintilar ieleni, omario artani lirinin. Sima ni yulma nin equatunuva. An si tintale varda oileseo, ve fanyar mariat elentariotane. Arilie tier ondulave lumbule, ar sindonam virello, caeta mornia. I falmaniar imbenet ar hisie, untupa, calacurio, mire oale, si vanwa na, Romello vanwa valamar, namiria, nai, hirovalie valamar,
Nai Elia Hiruva Namaria.
And to translate, ah, like gold fall the leaves in the wind, long years numberless as the wings of trees. The long years have passed like swift draughts of the sweet mead in lofty halls beyond the west, beneath the blue vaults of Varda, wherein the stars tremble in the song of her voice, holy and queenly. Who now shall refill the cup for me? For now the kindler Varda, the queen of the stars, from Mount Everwhite, has uplifted her hands like clouds, and all paths are drowned deep in shadow, and out of a grey country darkness lies in the foaming ways between us, and mist covers the jewels of Kalakiria forever. Now lost, lost to those from the east is Valamar. Farewell! Maybe thou shalt find Valamar. Maybe even thou shalt find it. Farewell. Varda is the name of the lady whom the elves in these lands of exile name Elbereth. Suddenly the river swept round a bend, and the banks rose upon either side, and the light of Lorien was hidden. Never did Frodo see that fair land again. The travellers now turned their faces to the journey. The sun was before them, and their eyes were dazzled, for all were filled with tears. Gimli wept openly.
I have looked the last upon that which was fairest, he said to Legolas, his companion. Henceforward I will call nothing fair unless it is her gift.
He put his hand to his breast.
Tell me, Legolas, why did I come on this quest? Little did I know where chief peril lay. Truly Elrond spoke, saying that we could not foresee that which we might meet upon the road. Torment in the dark was the danger that I feared, and yet it did not hold me back. But I would not have come, had I known the danger of light and joy. Now I have taken my worst wound in this parting, even if I were to go this night straight to the Dark Lord. Alas for Gimli, son of Gloin.
Nay, said Legolas, alas for us all, and for all that walk the world in these after days, for such is the way of it, to find and lose, as it seems to those whose boat is on the running stream. But I count you blessed, Gimli, son of Gloin, for your loss you suffer of your own free will, and you might have chosen otherwise. But you have not forsaken your companions, and the least reward that you shall have is that the memory of Lothlorien shall remain ever clear and unstained in your heart, and shall neither fade nor grow stale.
Maybe, said Gimli, and I thank you for your words. True words, doubtless, yet all such comfort is cold. Memory is not what the heart desires. That is only a mirror, be it clear as Keled-Zaram. Or so says the heart of Gimli the dwarf. Elves may see things otherwise. Indeed, I have heard that for them memory is more like to the waking world than to a dream. Not so for dwarves. But let us talk no more of it. Look to the boat. She is too low in the water with all this baggage, and the great river is swift. I do not wish to drown my grief in cold water.
He took up a paddle and steered toward the western bank, following Aragorn's boat ahead, which had already moved out of the middle stream. So the company went on their long way, down the wide hurrying waters, borne ever southward. Bare woods stalked along either bank, and they could not see any glimpse of the lands behind. The breeze died away, and the river flowed without a sound. No voice of bird broke the silence. The sun grew misty as the day grew old, till it gleamed with a pale sky like a high white pearl. Then it faded into the west, and dusk came early, followed by a grey and starless night. Far into the dark, quiet hours they floated onward, guiding their boats under the overhanging shadows of the western woods. Great trees passed by like ghosts, thrusting their twisty, thirsty roots through the mist down into the water. It was dreary and cold. Frodo sat and listened to the faint lap and gurgle of the river fretting among the tree roots and driftwood near the shore, until his head nodded and he fell into an uneasy sleep. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. Oh, hey there, Skooma Lizard. How's it going? Thank you, everybody. Let's continue onwards, actually. I think if we push it a little bit, the next chapter is the Great River. That's not very long. And then there's the Breaking of the Fellowship, which is the final chapter. We might go a little bit late. but there's only about 30 pages left in the book. And I would like to do it because I don't want to have to worry about doing something where we start the Fellowship of the Ring and then have to stop and start another book. I would like the next stream to be the Two Towers. So let's do it. Yeah, let's run it. Exactly, Santa Cruz. Let's run it. Chapter 9, The Great River. Frodo was roused by Sam. He found that he was lying, well wrapped, under tall, grey-skinned trees in a quiet corner of the woodlands on the west bank of the great river Anduin. He had slept the night away, and the grey of morning was dim among the bare branches. Gimli was busy with a small fire near at hand. They started again before the day was broad. Not that most of the company were eager to hurry southward. They were content that the decision, which they must make at latest when they come to Rhoros in the Tindrock Isle, still lay some days ahead. And they let the river bear them on at its own pace, having no desire to hasten towards the perils that lay beyond, whichever course they took in the end. Aragorn left them drift with the stream as they wished, husbanding their strength against weariness to come. But he insisted that at least they should start early each day and journey on far into the evening, for he felt in his heart that time was pressing, and he feared that the Dark Lord had not been idle while they lingered in Lorien. It's 7 p.m. where you are? It's just about to be 10 p.m. where I am, and I normally like to end streams around 10:30, but I think we may go a little late. We're going to go as long as we need to finish the Fellowship of the Ring. Nonetheless, they saw no sign of an enemy that day, nor the next. The dull grey hours passed without event. As the third day of their voyage wore on, the lands changed slowly. The trees thinned and then failed altogether. On the eastern bank to their left they saw long, formless slopes stretching up and away toward the sky. Brown and withered they'd look, as if fire had passed over them, leaving no living blade of green, an unfriendly waste without even a broken tree or a bold stone to relieve the emptiness. They had come to the brown lands that lay, vast and desolate, between southern Mirkwood and the hills of the Emyn What pestilence or war or evil deed of the enemy had so blasted all that region, even Aragorn could not tell. Upon the west to their right, the land was treeless also, but it was flat and in many places green with wide plains of grass. On this side of the river they passed forests of great reeds, so tall that they shut out all view to the west, as the little boats went rustling by along their fluttering borders. Their dark, withered plumes bent and tossed in the light, cold airs, hissing softly and sadly. Here and there, through openings, Frodo could catch sudden glimpses of rolling meads, and far beyond them hills in the sunset. And then away, on the edge of sight, a dark line where marched the southernmost ranks of the Misty Mountains. There was no sign of living, moving things save birds. Of these there were many, small fowl, whistling and piping in the reeds, but they were seldom seen. Once or twice the travellers heard the rush and whine of swan wings, and looking up they saw a great phalanx streaming across the sky. "Swans," said Sam, "and mighty big ones too." "Yes," said Aragorn, "and they are black swans." "How wide and empty and mournful all this country looks," said Frodo. "I always imagined that as one journeyed south it got warmer and merrier until winter was left behind forever." "But we have not journeyed far south yet," answered Aragorn. "It is still winter, and we are far from the sea. Here the world is cold until the sudden spring, and we may yet have snow again. Far away down in the bay of Belfalas, to which Anduin runs, it is warm and merry, maybe, or it would be, but for the enemy. But here we are not above 60 leagues, I guess, south of the south farthing away of your shire. Hundreds of long miles yonder. You are looking now southwest across the north plains of the Riddermark, Rohan, the land of the horse lords. Ere long we shall come to the mouth of the Limelight that runs down from Fangorn to join the great river. That is north boundary of Rohan, and of old all that lay between Limelight and the White Mountains belonged to the Rohirrim. It is a rich and pleasant land, and its grass has no rival, but in these evil days folk who do not dwell by the river, or ride often to its shores. Anduin is wide, yet the orcs can shoot their arrows far across the stream, and of late, it is said, they have dared to cross the water and raid the herds and studs of Rohan. Sam looked from bank to bank uneasily. The trees had seemed hostile before, as if they harbored secret eyes and lurking dangers. Now he wished the trees were still there. He felt the company was too naked, afloat in little open boats in the midst of shelterless land and on a river that was the frontier of war. In the next day or two, as they went on, borne steadily southward, this feeling of insecurity grew on all the company. For a whole day they took to their paddles and hastened forward. The banks slid by. Soon the river broadened and grew more shallow. Long stony beaches lay upon the east, and there were gravel shoals in the water, so that careful steering was needed. The brown lands rose into the bleak wolds, over which flowed a chill air from the east. On the other side, the meads had become rolling downs of withered grass amid a land of fen and tussock. Frodo shivered, thinking of the lawns and fountains, the clear sun and gentle rains of Lothlorien. There was little speech and no laughter in any of these boats. Each member of the company was busy with his own thoughts. The heart of Legolas was running under the stars of a summer night in some northern glade amid the beech woods. Gimli was fingering gold in his mind and wondering if it were fit to be wrought into the housing of the lady's gift. Merry and Pippin in the middle boat were ill at ease, for Boromir sat muttering to himself, sometimes biting his nails, as if some restlessness or doubt consumed him, sometimes seizing a paddle and driving the boat close behind Aragorn's. Then Pippin, who sat in the bow looking back, caught a queer gleam in his eye, as he peered forward, gazing at Frodo. Sam had long ago made up his mind that, though boats were maybe not as dangerous as he had been brought up to believe, they were far more uncomfortable than even he had imagined. He was cramped and miserable, having nothing to do but stare at the winterlands crawling by and the grey water on either side of him. Even when the paddles were in use, they did not trust Sam with one. As dusk drew down on the fourth day, he was looking back over the bowed heads of Frodo and Aragorn and the following boats. He was drowsy and longed for camp and the feel of earth under his toes. Suddenly something caught his eye. At first he stared at it listlessly. Then he sat up and rubbed his eyes, but when he looked again, he could see it no more. That night they camped on a small eyot close to the western bank. Sam lay rolled in blankets beside Frodo. "I had a funny dream an hour or two before we stopped, Mr. Frodo," he said. "Or maybe it wasn't a dream. Funny it was anyway." "Well, what was it?" said Frodo, knowing that Sam would not settle down until he had told his tale, whatever it was. "I haven't seen or thought about anything to make me smile since we left Lothlorien." "It wasn't funny that way, Mr. Frodo. It was queer, all wrong, if it wasn't a dream. And you had best hear it. It was like this. I saw a log with eyes." "The log's all right," said Frodo. "There are many in the river, but leave out the eyes." "That I won't," said Sam. "'Twas the eyes that made me sit up so as to speak. I saw what I took to be a log floating along in the half-light behind Gimli's boat, but I didn't give much heed to it. Then it seemed as if the big log was slowly catching us up. And then that was peculiar, as you might say, seeing as we were all floating on the stream together. Then, just as I saw the eyes, two pale sorts of points, shiny-like, on a lump near the end of the log. What's more, it wasn't a log, for it had paddle feet like a swan's almost, only they seemed bigger, and it kept dipping in and out of the water." That is when I sat right up and rubbed my eyes, meaning to give a shout, if it was still there when I had rubbed the drowse out of my head, for the whatever it was coming along fast now and getting close behind Gimli. But whether those two lamps spotted me moving and staring, or whether I came to my senses, I don't know. When I looked again, it wasn't there. Yet I think I caught a glimpse, with the tail of my eye, as the saying is, of something dark shooting under the shadow of the bank. I couldn't see no more eyes, though. I said to myself, "Dreaming again, Sam Gamgee," I said, and I said no more just then, but I've been thinking since, and now I'm not so sure. What do you make of it, Mr. Frodo? "I should make nothing of it but a log in the dusk and sleep in your eyes, Sam," said Frodo. If this was the first time that those eyes had been seen. But it wasn't. I saw them away back north before we reached Lorien, and I saw a strange creature with eyes climbing to the flet that night. Haldir saw it too. And do you remember the report of the elves that went after the orc band? "Ah," said Sam, "I do. And I remember more too. I don't like my thoughts, but thinking of one thing and another, and Mr. Bilbo's stories and all, I fancy I could put a name on the creature at a guess. A nasty name. Gollum, maybe." "Yes, that is what I have feared for some time," said Frodo. "Ever since the night on the flet. I suppose he was lurking in Moria, and picked up our trail then. But I hoped that our stay in Lorien would throw him off the scent again. The miserable creature must have been hiding in the woods by the Silver Lord, watching us start off." "That's about it," said Sam.
And we better be a bit more watchful ourselves, or we'll find some nasty fingers round our necks one of these nights, if we ever wake up to feel anything. And that's what I was leading to. No need to trouble Strider or the others tonight. I'll keep watch. I could sleep tomorrow, being no more than luggage in a boat, as you might say. I might, said Frodo, and I might say luggage with eyes. You shall watch, but only if you promise to wake me up halfway towards morning if nothing happens before then. In the dead hours, Frodo came out of a deep, dark sleep to find Sam shaking him. It's a shame to wake you, whispered Sam. But that's what she said. There's nothing to tell, or not much. I thought I heard some soft plashing and a sniffling noise a while back, but you hear a lot of such queer sounds by a river at night. He lay down, and Frodo sat up, huddled in his blankets, and fought off his sleep. Minutes or hours passed slowly, and nothing happened. Frodo was just yielding to the temptation to lie down again when a dark shape, hardly visible, floated close to one of the moored boats. A long, whitish hand could be dimly seen as it shot out and grabbed the gunwale. Two pale, lamp-like eyes shone coldly as they peered out inside, and then they lifted and gazed up at Frodo on the Ayot. They were not more than a yard or two away, and Frodo heard the soft hiss of intaken breath. He stood up, drawing Sting from its sheath, and faced the eyes. Immediately their light was shut off. There was another hiss and a splash, and the dark log shape shot away downstream into the night. Aragorn stirred in his sleep, turned over, and sat up. What is it? He whispered, springing up and coming to Frodo. I felt something in my sleep. Why have you drawn your sword? Gollum, answered Frodo. Or at least so I guess. Ah, said Aragorn. So you know about our little footpad, do you? He padded after us all through Moria and right down to Nimrodel. Since we took to boats, he's been lying on a log and paddling with his hands and feet. I've tried to catch him once or twice at night, but he is slyer than a fox and as slippery as a fish. I hoped the river voyage would beat him, but he's too clever a waterman. We shall have to try going faster tomorrow. You lie down now, and I will keep watch for what is left of the night. I wish I could lay my hands on the wretch. We might make him useful, but if I cannot, we shall have to try and lose him. He is very dangerous. Quite apart from murder by night on his own account, he may put an enemy that is about on our track. The night passed without Gollum showing so much as a shadow again. After that the company took a sharp lookout, but they saw no more of Gollum while the voyage lasted. If he was still following, he was very wary and cunning. At Aragorn's bidding, they paddled now for long spells, and the banks went swiftly by. But they saw little of the country, for they journeyed mostly by night and twilight, resting by day and lying as hidden as the land allowed. In this way the time passed without event until the 7th day. The weather was still grey and overcast, with wind from the east. But as evening drew into night, the sky again westward cleared, and the pools of faint yellow and pale light, yellow and pale green, opened under the grey shores of cloud. There the white rind of the new moon could be seen glimmering in the remote lakes. Sam looked at it and puckered up his brows. The next day the country on either side began to change rapidly. The banks began to rise and grow stony. Soon they were passing through a hilly, rocky land. On both shores there were steep slopes buried in the deep brakes of thorn and sloe, tangled with brambles and creepers. Beyond them stood low, crumbling cliffs and chimneys of grey, weathered stone, dark with ivy, and beyond these again there rose high ridges crowned with wind-written firs. They were drawing near to the grey hill of the Emyn Muil, the southern march of Wilderland. There were many birds about the cliffs and rock chimneys, and all day high into the air flocks of birds had been circling, black against the pale sky. As they lay in their camp that day, Aragorn watched the flights doubtfully, wondering if Gollum had been doing some mischief, and the news of their voyage was now moving in the wilderness. Later, as the sun was setting and the company was stirring and getting ready to start again, he described a dark spot against the fading light, a great bird high and far off, now wheeling, now flying on slowly southward. "What is that, Legolas?" he asked, pointing to the northern sky. "Is it, as I think, an eagle?" "Yes," said Legolas. "It is an eagle, a hunting eagle." "I wonder what that forebodes. It is far from the mountains." "We will not start until it is fully dark," said Aragorn. The 8th night of their journey came. It was silent and windless. The grey east wind had passed away. The thin crescent of the moon had fallen early in the pale sunset. But the sky was clear above, and though far away in the south there were great ranges of cloud that still shone faintly, in the west stars glinted bright. Come, said Aragorn, we will venture one more journey by night. We are coming to the reaches of the river that I do not know well, for I have never journeyed by water in these parts before, nor between here and the rapids of Sarn Geber. But if I am right in my reckoning, there are still many miles ahead. Still there are dangerous places, even before we came there, rocks and stony eyots in the stream. We must keep a sharp watch and not try to paddle swiftly. To Sam in the leading boat was given the task of watchman. He lay forward, peering into the gloom. The night grew dark, but the stars above were strangely bright, and there was a glimmer on the face of the river. It was close on midnight, and they had been drifting for some while, hardly using the paddles, when suddenly Sam cried out. Only a few yards ahead, dark slopes loomed in the stream, and he heard the swirl of racing water. There was a swift current which swung left, toward the eastern shore, where the channel was clear. And they were swept aside. The travelers could see, now very close, the pale foam of the river lashing against sharp rocks that were thrust out far into the stream like a ridge of teeth. The boats were all huddled together. "Hoy there, Aragorn!" shouted Boromir as his boat bumped into the leader. "This is madness! We cannot dare the rapids by night, but no boat can live in Sarn Geber, be it night or day." "Back, back!" cried Aragorn. Turn if you can." He drove his paddle into the water, trying to hold the boat and bring it round. "I am out of my reckoning," he said to Frodo. "I did not know that we had come so far. Anduin flows faster than I thought. Sarn Geber must be close at hand already." With great efforts they checked the boats and slowly brought them about, but at first they could make only small headway against the current, and all the time they were carried nearer and nearer to the eastern bank. Now dark and ominous it looked up in the night. "All together, paddle!" shouted Boromir. "Paddle, or we shall be driven on the shoals." Even as he spoke, Frodo felt the keel beneath him grate upon stone. At that moment there was a twang of bowstrings. Several arrows whistled over them, and some fell among them. One smote Frodo between the shoulders, and he lurched forward with a cry, letting go of his paddle, but the arrow fell back, foiled by his hidden coat of mail. Another passed through Aragorn's hood, and a third stood fast in the gunwale of the second boat, close by Merry's hand. Sam thought he could glimpse black figures running to and fro upon the long shingle banks that lay under the eastern shore. They seemed very near. "Yerch!" said Legolas, falling into his own tongue. "Orcs!" cried Gimli. "Gollum's doing, I'll be bound," said Sam to Frodo. "And a nice place to choose, too. The river seems set on taking us right into their arms." They all leaned forward, straining at the paddles. Even Sam took a hand. Every moment they expected to feel the bite of black feathered arrows. Many whined overhead or struck the water nearby, but there were no more hits. It was dark, but not too dark for night eyes of orcs, and in the star glimmer they must have offered their cunning foes some mark, unless it was that the grey cloaks of Lorien and grey timber of the elf-wrought boots defeated the malice of the archers of Mordor. 1 second. That was a noise. That was a text message. Let me see if it's anything important. Uh-oh, it's Laurel. She said, "Dang, I just now got this," because I sent her the message saying that we had gone live. Stroke by stroke they labored on. In the darkness it was hard to be sure that they were indeed moving at all, but slowly the swirl of the water grew less, and the shadow of the eastern bank faded back into the night. At last, as far as they could judge, they had reached the middle of the stream again, and had driven their boats back some distance above the jutting rocks. Then, half turning, they thrust them with all their strength toward the western shore. Under the shadow of bushes, leaning out over the water, they halted and drew breath. Legolas laid down his paddle, and took up the bow that he had brought from Lorien. Then he sprang ashore and climbed a few paces up the bank. Stringing the bow and fitting an arrow, he turned, peering back over the river into the darkness. Across the water there were shrill cries, but nothing could be seen. Frodo looked up at the elf standing tall above him as he gazed into the night, seeking a mark to shoot at. His head was dark, crowned with sharp white stars that glittered in the black pools of the sky behind. But now, rising and sailing up from the south, the great clouds advanced, sending out dark outriders to the starry fields. A sudden dread fell on the company. "Elbereth Chthoniel," sighed Legolas as he looked up. Even as he did so, a dark shape, like a cloud, and yet not a cloud, for it moved far more swiftly, came out of the blackness in the south, and sped toward the company, blotting out all light as it approached. Soon it appeared as a great winged creature, blacker than the pits in night. Fierce voices rose up to greet it from across the water. Frodo felt a sudden chill running through him and clutching at his heart. There was a deadly cold, like the memory of an old wound in his shoulder. He crouched down as if to hide.
Suddenly the great bow of Lorien sang. Shrill went the arrow from the elven string. Frodo looked up. Almost above him the wing-shaped swerved. There was a harsh, croaking scream as it fell out of the air, vanishing down into the gloom of the eastern shore. The sky was clean again. There was a tumult of many voices far away, cursing and wailing in the darkness, and then silence. Neither shaft nor cry came again from the east that night. Absolutely, Legolas. One of his greatest moments here. He's not nearly as big of a character as people who may think, have seen the films, because the films built him up a lot. But this is his greatest moment. He goes and he runs up the shore and he invokes the name of Varda Elbereth Chthoniel and he shoots an arrow and he takes down one of the Nazgul birds. We don't know that's what it is, but that is what it is. We don't know yet what it is. And it falls, and, so that's what was happening there. It was not only orcs, but one of the Nazgul was there flying. It might have even been the Witch King, but whichever one it was, it just lost a steed, and that really puts them behind there. Absolutely one of the greatest moments for Legolas, who's not really a major character, but there we have it. After a while, Aragorn led the boats back upstream. They felt their way along the water's edge for some distance until they found a small, shallow bay. A few low trees grew there close to the water, and behind them rose a steep, rocky bank. Here the company decided to stay and await the dawn. It was useless to attempt to move forward by night. They made no camp and lit no fire, but lay huddled in the boats, moored close together.
"Praised be the bow of Galadriel, and the hand and eye of Legolas," said Gimli as he munched a wafer of lembas. "That was a mighty shot in the dark, my friend."
"But who can say what it hit?" said Legolas.
"I cannot," said Gimli, "but I am glad that the shadow came no nearer. I liked it not at all. Too much it reminded me of the shadow in Moria, a shadow of the Balrog," he ended in a whisper.
"It was not a Balrog," said Frodo, still shivering with the chill that had come upon him. "It was something colder. I think it was—" Then he paused and fell silent. "What do you think?" asked Boromir eagerly, leaning from his boat as if he were trying to catch a glimpse of Frodo's face. "I think—" "No, I will not say," answered Frodo. "Whatever it was, its fall has dismayed our enemies." "So it seems," said Aragorn. "Yet where they are and how many, and what they will do next, we do not know. This night we must all be sleepless. Dark hides us now. But what the day will show, who can tell? Have your weapons close to hand." Sam sat tapping the hilt of his sword as if he were counting on his fingers and looking up at the sky. Now, I just want to pause here. Now, they mentioned earlier, they're talking about the moon, right? Because they've been traveling at night, and they mentioned the new moon and then the crescent moon. Now, notice that when they said new moon, and Sam kind of looked at it and was like, huh. And now he's finally going to speak about what his issue with the moon is here. "It's very strange," he muttered. "The moon's the same in the Shire and in Wilderland, or it ought to be. But either it's out of its running, or I'm all wrong in my reckoning. You'll remember, Mr. Frodo, the moon was waning as we lay on the flat up in that tree, a week from the full, I reckon. And we'd been a week on the way last night, when then pops a new moon as thin as a nail paring, as if we'd never stayed no time in the Elvish country. Well, I can remember 3 nights there for certain, and I seem to remember several more, but I would take my oath it was never a whole month. Anyone would think that time did not count in there." Now, before I continue on, I just want to mention that what Sam is talking about, that the idea that Lorien, that when you're Lorien, time actually does not pass, and that the moon is the same because they went into Lorien and came out, it was the same, because they really, had spent no time at all, really, because time doesn't count in there. And that was actually an idea that Tolkien had early on, that Lorien is not only feels timeless, but actually is timeless. And he decided, after all, that's not such a great idea. That would make the Rings of Power a little bit too powerful for what he was going for. But that was his original idea. "And perhaps that was the way of it," said Frodo. "In that land, maybe, there was a time that has elsewhere long gone by. It was not, I think, until the Silverlord bore us back to Anduin that we returned to the time that flows through the mortal lands into the great sea. And I don't remember any moon, either new or old, in Caras Galadon, only stars by night and sun by day." Legolas stirred in his boat. "Nay, time does not tarry ever," he said, "but change and growth is not in all things and places alike. For the elves the world moves, and it moves both very swift and very slow. Swift, because they themselves change little, and all else fleets by. It is a grief to them. Slow, because they do not count the running years, not for themselves. The passing seasons are but ripples, ever repeated in the long, long stream. Yet beneath the sun all things must wear to an end at last. But the wearing is slow in Lorien, said Frodo. The power of the lady is on it. Rich are the hours, though short they seem, in Caras Galadon, where Galadriel wields the elven ring. That should not have been said outside Lorien, not even to me, said Aragorn. Speak no more of it. But so it is, Sam. In that land you lost your count. Time flowed swiftly by us. As for the elves, the old moon passed, and a new moon waxed and waned in the world outside while we tarried there. And yestereve a new moon came again. Winter is nearly gone. Time flows on to a spring of little hope. So I love this moment because he's saying, yeah, we really did spend, just about a month in Lorien. And also, Frodo just sort of blurts out that it's the Ring of Power that's causing this. And Aragorn's like, you really shouldn't have said that. That you're really saying too much there. You're giving away something that's meant to be a great secret. Although I personally think Galadriel may not have minded that so much. But, Aragorn's like, you keep that one to yourself there, buddy. But what's interesting here, and we talk about this a lot on Quora and such, is the passing of time for the elves, what it's like in the Undying Lands, what it's like in Lothlorien. It doesn't make you immortal. It doesn't make you age faster. It doesn't do any of that. But what it does do is it makes you feel time as if you were an elf. And the way that Legolas describes it, the time seems to go by very quickly because the elves don't change, but everything else does. But it also seems to go by slowly in another sort of way. But yeah, so really, it's not that time goes faster or goes by slower, whether you're in Middle Earth or whether you're in Erisea or wherever. It's that it just feels different, and people seem to really not get that. And I understand because the language used in the Silmarillion and in Unfinished Tales is a bit different, and it can get kind of confusing. But that's really what it is. When the elves of Erisea said to the men of Númenor that if they come to the land of Aemon, where they wanted to go, that their lives would just go by much quicker. That doesn't mean that they're going to be killed by holy death rays or that you age faster. It means that their perception of time would change to that of an elf, but they wouldn't be immortal. They would be mortal, so it would seem to them that their life would just be over suddenly because of the perception of time. So that's really what they're getting at. Sam can only remember 3 distinct days that they stayed in Lothlorien, and he said, I seem to remember other days. And even when they were there, it said that everything seemed to blend together and into just this blur of time. And then Aragorn's like, no, we were there for a whole month, which is crazy. All right, let's continue on. The night passed silently. No voice or call was heard again in the water. The travelers huddled in their boats felt the changes of the weather. The air grew warm and very still under the great moist clouds that had floated up from the south and the distant seas. The rushing of the river over the rocks of the rapids seems to grow louder and closer. The twigs of the trees above them began to drip. When the day came, the mood of the world around them had become soft and sad. Slowly, the dawn grew to a pale light, diffused and shadowless. There was mist on the river, and white fog swathed the shore, and the far bank could not be seen. I can't abide fog, said Sam, but this seems to be a lucky one. Now perhaps we can get away without those cursed goblins seeing us. Perhaps so, said Aragorn, but it'll be hard to find the path, unless the fog lifts a little later on, and we must find the path if we are to pass San Gerber, and come to the Emyn Muil. I do not see why we should pass the rapids or follow the river any further, said Boromir. If the Emyn Muil lie before us, then we can abandon these cockle boats, and strike westward and southward until we come to the Entwash and cross into my own land. We can, if we are making for Minas Tirith, said Aragorn, but that is not yet agreed, and such a course may be more perilous than it sounds. The Vale of Entwash is flat and fenny, and fog is a deadly peril there. Let's try that again. And fog is a deadly peril there for those on foot and laden. I would not abandon our boats until we must. The river is at least a path that cannot be missed. But the enemy holds the eastern bank, objected Boromir.
and even as you pass the gates of Argonath, and come unmolested to Tidrock, what will you do then? Leap down the falls and land in the marshes? No, answered Aragorn. Say rather we will bear our boats by the ancient way to Rorosfoot, and there take to the water again. Do you not know, Boromir, or do you choose to forget the North Stair, and the high seat upon Amon Hen, that were made in the days of the great kings? I at least have a mind to stand in that high place again, before I decide my further course. There maybe we shall see some sign that will guide us. Boromir held out long against this choice, but when it became plain that Frodo would follow Aragorn wherever he went, he gave in. It is not in the way of men of Minas Tirith to desert their friends at need, he said. You will need my strength, if you are ever to reach the Tindrock. To the Tall Isle I will go, but no further. There I shall turn to my home, alone if my help has not earned the reward of any companionship. The day was now growing, and the fog had lifted a little. It was decided that Aragorn and Legolas should at once go forward along the shore, while the others remained by the boats. Aragorn hoped to find some way by which they could both carry their boats and their baggage to the smoother water beyond the rapids. Boats of the elves would not sink, maybe, he said, but that does not say that we should come through San Gerber alive. None have ever done so yet. No road was made by the men of Gondor in this region, for even in their great days, their realm did not reach up Anduin beyond the Emyn Muil. But there is a portage way somewhere on the western shore, if I can find it. It cannot yet have perished, for light boats used to journey out of the Wilderland down to Osgiliath, and still did so until a few years ago when the orcs of Mordor began to multiply. Seldom in my life has any boat come out of the north, said the orc. And the orcs prowl on the east shore, said Boromir. If you go forward, peril will grow with every mile, even if you find a path. Peril lies ahead on every southward road, answered Aragorn. Wait for us one day. If we do not return in that time, you will know that evil has indeed befallen us. Then you may take a new leader and follow him as best you can. It was with a heavy heart that Frodo saw Aragorn and Legolas climb the steep bank and vanish into the mists. But his fears proved groundless. Only 2 or 3 hours had passed, and it was barely midday, when the shadowy shapes of the explorers appeared again. All is well, said Aragorn, as he clambered down the bank. There is a track, and it leads to a good landing that is still serviceable. The distance is not great. The head of the rapids is but half a mile below us, and there are little more than a mile long. Not far beyond them, the stream becomes clear and smooth again, though it runs swiftly. Our hardest task will be to get our boats and baggage to the old portage way. We have found it, but it lies well back from the waterside here, and it runs under the lee of the rock wall, a furlong or more down from the shore. We did not find where the northward landing lies. If it still remains, we must have passed it yesterday night. We must labour far upstream and yet miss it in the fog. I fear we must leave the river now and make for the portage way as best we can from here. That would not be easy, even if we were all men, said Boromir. Yet, such as we are, we will try it. Aye, we will, said Gimli. The legs of men will lag on a rough road while a dwarf goes on. Be the burden twice his own weight, Master Boromir. The task proved hard indeed. Yet in the end it was done. The goods were taken out of the boats and brought to the top of the bank, where there was a level space. Then the boats were drawn out of the river and carried up. They were far less heavy than any had expected. Of what tree growing in the elvish country they were made, not even Legolas knew, but the wood was tough yet strangely light. Merry and Pippin alone could carry their boat with ease along the flat. Nonetheless, it needed the strength of the two men to lift and haul them over the ground that the company now had to cross. It sloped up away from the river, a tumbled waste of grey limestone boulders, with many hidden holes shrouded with weeds and brushes. There were thickets and brambles, and sheer dells, and here and there boggy pools fed by waters trickling from the terraces further inland. One by one Boromir and Aragorn carried the boats, while all the others toiled and scrambled after them with the baggage. At last all was removed and laid on the portage way. Then, with little further hindrance, save from sprawling briars and many fallen stones, they moved forward all together. Fog still hung in veils upon the crumbling rock wall, and to their left mist shrouded the river, and they could hear it rushing and foaming above the sharp shells and stony teeth of Sarn Gabir, but they could not see it. Twice they made the journey, before all was brought safe to the southern landing. There the portage way, turning back to the waterside, ran gently down to the shallow edge of a little pool. It seemed to have been scooped in the riverside, not by hand, but by the water swirling down from Sarn Gibber against the low pier of rock that jutted out some way into the stream.
Beyond it the shore rose sheer into a grey cliff, and there was no further passage for those on foot. Already the short afternoon was past, and a dim, cloudy dusk was closing in. They sat beside the water, listening to the confused rush and roar of the rapids hidden in the mist. They were tired and sleepy, and their hearts were as gloomy as the dying day. "Well, here we are, and here we must pass another night," said Boromir. "We need sleep, and even if Aragorn had a mind to pass the gates of Argonath by night, we are all too tired. Except, no doubt, our sturdy dwarf." Gimli made no reply. He was nodding as he sat. "Let us rest as much as we can now," said Aragorn. "Tomorrow we must journey by day again. Unless the weather changes once more and cheats us, we shall have a good chance of slipping through, unseen by any eyes in the eastern shore. But tonight two must watch together in turns, 3 hours off and one on guard." Just going to pause for some water here. Not a lot of lore to talk about in this section, but a lot of scenery. People give Tolkien sort of this reputation that he should not have of writing a lot of detailed descriptions of meals, of food, But that's not true. That was more of a C.S. Lewis thing. For him, it was all the land. He wanted you to really see it in his mind. Nothing happened that night worse than a brief drizzle of rain an hour before dawn. As soon as it was fully light, they started. Already the fog was thinning. They kept as close as they could to the western side, and they could see the dim shapes of the low cliffs rising ever higher, shadowy walls with their feet in the hurrying river. In the mid-morning the clouds drew down lower, and it began to rain heavily. They drew the skin covers over their boats to prevent them from being flooded, and drifted on. Little could be seen before them or about them through the grey falling curtains. The rain, however, did not last long. Slowly the sky above grew lighter, and then suddenly the clouds broke, and their draggled fringes trailed away northward up the river. The fogs and mists were gone. Before the travelers lay a wide ravine, with great rocky sides to which clung, upon shelves and in narrow crevices, a few thorn trees. The channel grew narrower, and the river swifter. Now they were speeding along, with little hope of stopping or turning, whatever they might meet ahead. Over them was a lane of pale blue sky. Around them, the dark overshadowed river, and before them, black, shutting out the sun, the hills of Emimnuil, in which no opening could be seen. Frodo, peering forward, saw in the distance 2 great rocks approaching, like great pinnacles or pillars of stone they seemed. Tall and sheer and ominous they stood upon either side of the stream. A narrow gap appeared between them, and the river swept the boats towards it. "Behold the Argonath, the pillars of the kings!" cried Aragorn. "We shall pass them soon. Keep the boats in line, and as far apart as you can. Hold the middle of the stream." As Frodo was borne towards them, the great pillars rose like towers to meet him. Giants they seemed to him, vast grey figures, silent but threatening. Then he saw that they were indeed shaped and fashioned. The craft and power of old had wrought upon them, and they still preserved through the suns and rains of forgotten years the mighty likenesses in which they had been hewn. Upon great pedestals founded in the deep waters stood 2 great kings of stone. Still, with blurred eyes and crannied brows, they frowned upon the north. The left hand of each was raised, palm outward, in a gesture of warning. In each right hand there was an axe. Upon each head there was a crumbling helm and crown. Great power and majesty they still wore, and silent wardens of a long-vanished kingdom. Awe and fear fell upon Frodo, and he cowered down, shutting his eyes and not daring to look up as the boat drew near. Even Boromir bowed his head as the boats whirled by, frail and fleeting as little leaves under the enduring shadow of the sentinels of Númenor. So they passed into the dark chasm of the gates. Sheer rose the dreadful cliffs to unguessed heights on either side. Far off was the dim sky. The black waters roared and echoed, and a wind screamed over them. Frodo, crouching over his knees, heard Sam in front muttering and groaning. "What a place! What a horrible place! Just let me get out of this boat, and I'll never wet my toes in a puddle again, let alone a river." "Fear not," said a strange voice behind him. Frodo turned and saw Strider, and yet not Strider, for the weather-worn ranger was no longer there. In the stern sat Aragorn, the son of Arathorn, proud and erect, guiding the boat with skillful strokes. His hood was cast back, and his dark hair was blowing in the wind.
A light was in his eyes, a king returning from exile to his own land. "Fear not," he said. "Long have I desired to look upon the likenesses of Isildur and Anarion, my sires of old. Under their shadow, Elisar the Elfstone, son of Arathorn in the house of Elendil, Isildur's son, heir of Elendil, has naught to dread." Then the light of his eyes faded, and he spoke to himself. "Would that Gandalf were here. How my heart yearns for Minas Anor and the walls of my own city. But whither now shall I go?" The chasm was long and dark, filled with the noise of wind and rushing water and echoing stone. It bent somewhat toward the west, so that at first all was dark ahead, but soon Frodo saw a tall gap of light before him, ever growing. Swiftly it drew near, and suddenly the boats shot through, out into a wide, clear night. The sun, already long fallen from the noon, was shining in a windy sky. The pent waters spread out into a long oval lake, pale Nen Hithul, fenced by steep grey hills whose sides were clad with trees, but their heads were bare, cold gleaming in the sunlight. At the far southern end rose 3 peaks. The midmost stood somewhat forward from the others and sundered from them, an island in the waters, about which the flowing river flung pale shimmering arms. Distant but deep, there came on the wind a roaring sound so like the roll of thunder far away. "Behold, Tolbrandir," said Aragorn, pointing south to the tall peak. "Upon the left stands Amon Law, and upon the right is Amon Hen, the hills of hearing and of sight. In the days of the great kings there were high seats upon them, and watch was kept there. But it is said that no foot of man or beast has ever set upon Tolbrandir. Ere the shade of night falls, we shall come to them. I hear the endless voice of Rhoros calling." The company rested now for a while, drifting south on the current that flowed through the middle of the lake. They ate some food, and then they took their paddles and hastened on their way. The sides of the westward hill fell into shadow, and the sun grew round and red. Here and there a misty star peered out. The 3 peaks loomed before them, darkling in the twilight. Rhoros was roaring with a great voice. Already night was laid on the flowing waters when the travellers came at last upon the shadow of the hills. The 10th day of their journey was over. Wilderland was behind them. They could go no further without choice between the east way and the west. The last stage of the quest was before them. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. Now there is only one chapter left, which is the breaking of the fellowship. And I would like to do that. Now, we're at the time where I would normally say, it's over, we gotta stop. But there isn't that much left. So let's push on. Chapter 10, the breaking of the fellowship. Aragorn led them right to the right arm of the river. Here upon its western side, under the shadow of Tolbrandir, a green lawn ran down to the water from the feet of Amon Hen. Behind it rose the first gentle slopes of the hill, clad with trees, and trees marched away westward along the curving shores of the lake. A little spring fell tumbling down and fed the grass. "Here we will rest tonight," said Aragorn. "This is the lawn of Parth Galen, a fair place in the summers of days of old. Let us hope that no evil has yet come here." They drew up their boats to the green banks, and beside them they made their camp. They set a watch, but had no sight nor sound of their enemies. If Gollum had contrived to follow them, he remained unseen and unheard. None the less, as night wore on, Aragorn grew uneasy, tossing often in his sleep and waking. In the small hours he got up and came to Frodo, whose turn it was to watch. "Why are you waking?" asked Frodo. "It is not your watch." "I do not know," answered Aragorn, "but a shadow and a threat has been growing in my sleep. It would be well to draw your sword." "Why?" said Frodo. "Are enemies at hand?" "Let us see what sting may show," answered Aragorn. Frodo then drew the elf blade from its sheath. To his dismay the edges gleamed dimly in the night. "Orcs," he said. "Not very near, and yet too near, it seems." "I feared as much," said Aragorn. "But maybe they are not on this side of the river. The light of sting is faint, and it may point to no more than spies of Mordor, roaming at the slopes of Amon Law. I have never heard before of orcs upon Amon Hen. Yet who knows what may happen in these evil days, now that Minas Tirith no longer holds secure passages of the Anduin. We must go warily tomorrow." The day came like fire and smoke. Low in the east there were black bars of clouds and the fumes of a great burning. The rising sun lit them from beneath with flames of murky red, but soon it climbed above them into a clear sky. The summit of Tolbrandir was tipped with gold. Frodo looked out eastward and gazed at the tall island.
Its sides sprang sheer out of the running water. High above the tall cliffs were steep slopes upon which trees climbed, mounting one's head above the other, and above them again were the grey faces of inaccessible rock, crowned by a great spire of stone. Many birds were circling about it, but no sign of other living things could be seen. When they had eaten, Aragorn called the company together. "The day is come at last," he said, "the day of choice, which we have long delayed. What shall now become of our company that has travelled so far in fellowship? Shall we turn west with Boromir and go to the walls of Gondor? Or turn east to the Fear and Shadow? Or shall we break our fellowship, and go this way and that as each may choose? Whatever we must do must be done soon. We cannot long halt here. The enemy is on the eastern shore, we know, and I fear that orcs may already be on this side of the water." There was a long silence in which no one spoke or moved. "Well, Frodo," said Aragorn at last, "I fear that the burden is laid upon you. You are the bearer appointed by the council. Your own way you alone can choose. In this matter I cannot advise you. I am not Gandalf, and though I have tried to bear his part, I do not know what design or hope he had for this hour, if indeed he had any. Most likely, it seems, if he were here now, the choice would still wait on you. Such is your fate." Frodo did not answer at once. Then he spoke slowly. "I know that haste is needed, yet I cannot choose. The burden is heavy. Give me an hour longer, and I will speak. Let me be alone." Aragorn looked at him with kindly pity. "Very well, Frodo, son of Drogo," he said. "You shall have an hour, and you shall be alone. We will stay here for a while, but do not stray far or out of call." Frodo sat for a moment with his head bowed. Sam, who had been watching his master with great concern, shook his head and muttered, "Plain as a pikestaff it is, but it's no good Sam Gamgee putting his spoke just now." Presently Frodo got up and walked away, and Sam saw that while the others restrained themselves, they did not stare at him. The eyes of Boromir followed Frodo intently, until he passed out of sight in the trees, at the foot of Amon Hen. Wandering aimlessly at first in the wood, Frodo found that his feet were leading him up toward the slope of the hill. He came to a path, the dwindling ruins of a road of long ago. In steep places, stairs of stone had been hewn, but now they were cracked and worn and split by the roots of trees. For some while he climbed, not caring which way he went, until he came to a grassy place. Rowan trees grew about it, and in the midst was a wide, flat stone. The little upland lawn was open upon the east, and was filled now with the early sunlight. Frodo halted and looked out over the river, far below him to Tol Brandir, and the birds wheeling in the great gulf of air between him and the untrodden isle. The voice of Rauros was a mighty roaring, mingled with a deep, throbbing boom. He sat down upon the stone and cupped his chin in his hands, staring eastward but seeing little with his eyes. All that had happened since Bilbo left the Shire was passing through his mind, and he recalled and pondered everything that he could remember of Gandalf's words. Time went on, and he still was no nearer to a choice. Suddenly he awoke from his thoughts. A strange feeling came to him that something was behind him, that unfriendly eyes were upon him. He sprang up and turned, but all that he saw to his surprise was Boromir, and his face was smiling and kind. "I was afraid for you, Frodo," he said, coming forward. "If Aragorn is right and orcs are near, then none of us should wander alone, and you least of all. So much depends on you, and my heart is too heavy. May I stay now and talk for a while, since I have found you? It would comfort me. Where there's so many, all speeches become a debate without end. But two together may perhaps find wisdom." "You are kind," answered Frodo, "but do not think that any speech will help me. For I know what I should do, but I am afraid of doing it, Boromir. Afraid." Boromir stood silent. Rauros roared endlessly on. The wind murmured in the branches of the trees. Frodo shivered. Suddenly Boromir came and sat beside him. "Are you sure that you do not suffer needlessly?" he said. "I wish to help you. You need counsel in your hard choice. Will you not take mine?" "I think I know already what counsel you would give, Boromir," said Frodo. "And it would seem like wisdom, but for the fair warning... Let's try that again. "And it would seem like wisdom, but for the warning of my heart." "Warning? Warning against what?" said Boromir sharply. "Against delay. Against the way that seems easier. Against refusal of the burden that is laid on me. Against, well, if it must be said, against trust in the strength and truth of men." "Yet that strength has long protected you, far away in your little country, though you knew it not. I do not doubt the valor of your people, but the world is changing. The walls of Minas Tirith may be strong, but they are not strong enough. If they fail, what then?
We shall fall in battle valiantly, yet there is hope that they will not fall. No hope while the ring lasts, said Frodo. Ah, the ring, said Boromir, his eyes lighting. The ring! Is it not a strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt for so small a thing? So small a thing! And I have seen it only for an instant in the house of Elrond. Could I not have sight of it again? So notice that he's sort of echoing Bilbo here. Let me see it again. Let me take a look at that thing. Frodo looked up. His heart went suddenly cold. He caught the strange gleam in Boromir's eyes, yet his face was still kind and friendly. It is best that it should lie hidden, he answered. As you wish, I care not, said Boromir. Yet, may I not even speak of it? For you seem ever to think only of its power in the hands of the enemy, of its evil uses, not of its good. The world is changing, you say. Minas Tirith will fall if the ring lasts, but why? Certainly if the ring were with the enemy, but why if it were with us? Were you not at the council, answered Frodo. Because we cannot use it, and what is done with it turns to evil. Boromir got up and walked about impatiently. So you go on, he cried. Gandalf, Elrond, all these folk have taught you to say so. For themselves they may be right. These elves and half-elves and wizards, they would come to a grief perhaps. Yet often I doubt that if they are wise and not merely timid, but each to his own kind, true-hearted men, they will not be corrupted. We of Minas Tirith have been staunch through long years of trial. We do not desire the power of wizard lords, only strength to defend ourselves. Strength in a just cause. And behold! In our need, chance brings to light the Ring of Power. It is a gift, I say. A gift to the foes of Mordor. It is mad not to use it, to use the power of the enemy against him. The fearless, the ruthless, those alone will achieve victory. What could not a warrior do in this hour, a great leader? What could not Aragorn do? Or if he refuses, why not Boromir? The ring would give me power of command. How I would drive the hosts of Mordor, and all men would flock to my banner. Boromir strode up and down, speaking ever more loudly. Almost he seemed to have forgotten Frodo, while his talk dwelt on walls and weapons and the mustering of men, and he drew plans for great alliances and glorious victories to be, and he cast down Mordor and became himself a mighty king, benevolent and wise. Suddenly he stopped and waved his arms. And they tell us to throw it away, he cried. I do not say destroy it. That might be well if reason could show any hope of doing so. It does not. The only plan that is proposed to us is that a halfling should walk blindly into Mordor and offer the enemy every chance of recapturing it for himself. Folly! Surely you see it, my friend, he said, turning now suddenly to Frodo again. You say that you are afraid. If it is so, the boldest should pardon you. But it is not really your good sense that revolts? No, I am afraid, said Frodo, simply afraid. But I am glad to have heard you speak so fully. My mind is clearer now. Then you will come to Minas Tirith, cried Boromir. His eyes were shining and his face eager. You misunderstand me, said Frodo. But you will come at least for a while, Boromir persisted. My city is not far now, and it is little further from there to Mordor than from here. We have been long in the wilderness, and you need news of what the enemy is doing before you make a move. Come with me, Frodo, he said. You need rest before your venture if go you must. He laid his hand on the hobbit's shoulder in friendly fashion, but Frodo felt the hand trembling with suppressed excitement. He stepped quickly away, and eyed with alarm the tall man, nearly twice his height and many times his match in strength. Why are you so unfriendly? Said Boromir. I am a true man, neither thief nor tracker. I need your ring, that you now know. But I give you my word that I do not desire to keep it. Will you not at least let me make trial of my plan? Lend me the ring. No, no, cried Frodo. The council laid it upon me to bear it. It is by our own folly that the enemy will defeat us, cried Boromir. How it angers me. Fool, obstinate fool, running wilfully to death and ruining our cause. If any mortals have claim to the ring, it is the men of Númenor, not the halflings. It is not yours save by unhappy chance. It might have been mine. It should have been mine. Give it to me. Frodo did not answer, but moved away until the great flat stone stood between them. Come, my friend, said Boromir in a softer voice. Why not get rid of it? Why not be free of your doubt and fear? You could lay the blame on me if you will. You could say that I was too strong and took it by force. For I am too strong for you, halfling, he cried, and suddenly he sprang over the stone and leaped at Frodo. His fair and pleasant face was hideously changed. A raging fire was in his eyes. Frodo dodged aside and again put the stone between them. There was only one thing he could do. Trembling, he pulled out the ring upon its chain and quickly slipped it on its finger, even as Boromir sprang at him again. The man gasped, stared for a moment amazed, and then ran wildly about, seeking here and there among the rocks and trees. "Miserable trickster!" he shouted. "Let me get my hands on you. Now I see your mind. You will take the ring to Sauron and sell us all. You have only waited your chance to leave us in the lurch. Curse you and all halflings to death and darkness." Then, catching his foot on a stone, he fell sprawling and lay on his face. For a while he was as still as his own curse had struck him down. Then suddenly he wept. He rose and passed his hand over his eyes, dashing away the tears. "What have I said?" he cried. "What have I done? Frodo! Frodo!" he called. "Come back! A madness took me, but it is past. Come back!" Let me pause here. So, I have always believed, and I believe that I will continue to believe, that when Boromir says that it was a passing madness, that he was being 100% truthful. The ring has been around him for a long time, and he is the spiritual weak link of the Fellowship. And for a while, he was under the protection of the other rings of power. In Imladris, Elrond's ring was there, and so was Gandalf's. And then he was traveling with Gandalf. And then Gandalf died. But it was not too long before he came under the umbrella of the protection of Galadriel. But you notice right after they come out of Lothlorien is when Boromir starts to act really, really funky. Sam starts to notice him staring at Frodo. Merry and Pippin are kind of uncomfortable around him. He's just being weird. He's starting to be kind of creepy. And here we see him just go into this rage. He sees these visions of what he can do and how he's going to become a great and benevolent king and lead the men of Numenor to victory. And he just flies into this rage and tries to attack Frodo and take the ring by force. Frodo goes away, and yes, at first he's cursing him and wailing, but then the madness passes. The ring is no longer near him. The ring has been calling out to Boromir for quite a while, and his resolve basically faltered, but it's back now. I fully believe that he was being truthful. There was no answer. Frodo did not even hear his cries. He was already far away, leaping blindly up the path to the hilltop. Terror and grief shook him, seeing in his thought the mad, fierce face of Boromir and his burning eyes. Thank you, Santa Cruz. Soon he came out alone to the summit of Amon Hen and halted, gasping for breath. He saw as through a mist a wide, flat circle, paved with mighty flags and surrounded with a crumbling battlement, and in the center, set upon 4 carven pillars, was a high seat, reached by a stair of many steps. Up he went and sat upon this ancient chair, feeling like a lost child that had clambered upon the throne of mountain kings. At first he could see little. He seemed to be in a world of mist, in which there were only shadows. The ring was upon him. Then, here and there, the mist gave way, and he saw many visions, small and clear, as if they were under his eyes upon a table and yet remote. There was no sound, only bright, living images. The world seems to have shrunk and fallen silent. He was sitting upon the seat of seeing on Amon Hen, the hill of the eye of the men of Numenor. Eastward he looked into wide, uncharted lands, nameless plains and forests unexplored. Northward he looked, and the great river lay like a ribbon beneath him, and the misty mountains stood small and hard as broken teeth. Westward he looked, and saw the broad pastures of Rohan, and Orthanc, the pinnacle of Isengard, like a black spike. Southward he looked, and below his very feet the great river curled like a toppling wave, and plunged over the falls of Rauros into a foaming pit. A glimmering rainbow played upon the flume. At Ether Anduin he saw the mighty delta of the river, and myriads of sea-birds whirling like a white dust in the sun, and beneath them a green and silver sea rippling in the endless lines.
but everywhere he looked he saw signs of war. The misty mountains were crawling like anthills. Orcs were issuing out of 1,000 holes. Under the boughs of Mirkwood there were deadly strifes of elves and men and fell beasts. The land of the Bjornings was aflame. A cloud was over Moria. Smoke rose on the borders of Lorien. Horsemen were galloping on the grass of Rohan. Wolves poured from Isengard. From the havens of Harad, ships of war put out to sea, and out of the east men were moving endlessly, swordsmen, spearmen, bowmen upon horses, chariots of chieftains, and leaden wains, and the power of the Dark Lord was in motion. Then, turning south again, he beheld Minas Tirith. Far away it seemed, and beautiful, white-walled, many-towered, proud and fair upon its mountain seat. Its battlements glittered with steel, and its turrets were bright with many banners. Hope leaped in his heart, but again Minas Tirith was set another fortress, greater and more strong. Thither eastward, unwilling, his eye was drawn. It passed the ruined bridges of Osgiliath, the grinning gates of Minas Morgul, and the haunted mountains. And it looked upon Gorgoroth, the valley of terror in the land of Mordor. Darkness lay there under the sun. Fire glowed amidst the smoke. Mount Doom was burning, and a great reek rising. Then at last his gaze was held. Wall upon wall, battlement upon battlement, black, immeasurably strong, mountain of iron, gate of steel, tower of adamant, he saw it. Barad-dûr, the fortress of Sauron. All hope left him. And suddenly he felt the eye. There was an eye in the dark tower that did not sleep. He knew that it had become aware of his gaze. A fierce, eager will was there. It leaped toward him, almost like a finger. He felt it searching for him. Very soon it would nail him down. No, just exactly where he was. Aemon Law it touched. It glanced upon Tolbrandir. He threw himself from the seat, crouching, covering his head with his grey hood. He heard himself crying out, "Never, never, or was it verily I come to you?" He could not tell. Then, as a flash from some other point of power, there came to his mind another thought. Take it off! Take it off! Fool, take it off! Take off the ring! So that other point of power, we aren't told here, but there's this other point of power saying, take off the ring, take off the ring. That is Gandalf the White. He has already returned. We don't meet him until the Two Towers, but he has already returned. He's in Lothlorien. He's got his white robes and his new staff. And he is distracting Sauron as best he can from finding Frodo, while also telling Frodo, take off the ring. The two powers strove in him. For a moment, perfectly balanced between their piercing points, he writhed, tormented. Suddenly he was aware of himself again. Frodo, neither the voice nor the eye, free to choose, and with one remaining instant in which to do so, he took the ring off his finger. He was kneeling in clear sunlight before the high seat. A black shadow seemed to pass, like an arm above him. It missed Amon Hen and groped out west and faded. Then all the sky was clean and blue, and birds sang in every tree. So have you ever seen J.R.R. Tolkien's artwork? He's known more for writing than for art. But he did draw. And one of the things that he drew, it was really nothing more than a sketch. Because he wasn't super good at drawing figures. He was very, very good at, well, I would say he was moderately good, I would say, at drawing landscapes and towers and things like that. But he did have a drawing of Sauron, and that's the way that he drew him, as like a head and an arm reaching outwards. And that was probably the moment of the fall of Sauron, when he reached out towards Aragorn and Gandalf and Imrahil at the Black Gate, and then wound up being blown away by the wind. But this is also Sauron just sort of reaching out with his vast arm and his eye, and just trying to see what he could see. And being stymied here by the fact that Frodo did take off the ring pretty much at the last second. Frodo rose to his feet. A great weariness was on him, but his will was firm and his heart lighter. He spoke aloud to himself. "I will do now what I must," he said. "This at least is plain. The evil of the ring is already at work, even in the company, and the ring must leave them before it does more harm. I will go alone. Some I cannot trust, and those I can trust are too dear to me. Poor old Sam, and Merry and Pippin. Strider, too. His heart yearns for Minas Tirith, and he will be needed there now. Boromir has fallen into evil. I will not go alone. I will go alone, at once." He went quickly down the path and came back to the lawn where Boromir had found him. Then he halted, listening. He thought he could hear cries and calls from the woods near the shore below. "They'll be hunting for me," he said. "I wonder how long I've been away. Hours, I should think." He hesitated. "What can I do?" he muttered. "I must go now, or I shall never go. I shan't get a chance again. I hate leaving them. And like this without any explanation. But surely they will understand. Sam will. And what else can I do?" Slowly he drew out the ring and put it on once more. He vanished and passed down the hill, less than a rustle of the wind. The others remained long by the riverside. For some time they had been silent, moving restlessly about. But now they were sitting in a circle, and they were talking. Every now and again they made efforts to speak of these other things, of their long road and many adventures. They questioned Aragorn concerning the realm of Gondor and its ancient history, and the remnants of the great works that could still be seen in this strange borderland of the Emyn Muil, the Stone Kings and the seats of Law and Hen, and the great stair beside the falls of Rauros. But always their thoughts and words strayed back to Frodo and the ring. What would Frodo choose to do? Why was he hesitating? "He is debating which course is the most desperate, I think," said Aragorn. "And well he may. It is now more hopeless than ever for the company to go east, since we have been tracked by Gollum, and must fear that the secret of our journey is already betrayed. But Minas Tirith is no nearer to the fire than the destruction of the burden. We may remain here for a while to make a brave stand, but the Lord Denethor and all his men cannot hope to do what even Elrond said was beyond his power, either to keep the burden secret or to hold off the full might of the enemy when he comes to take it. Which way would any of us choose in Frodo's place, I do not know. Now indeed we miss Gandalf most." "Grievous is our loss," said Legolas. "Yes, we must needs make up our mind without his aid. Why cannot we decide, and so help Frodo? Let us call him back and then vote. I should vote for Minas Tirith."
"And so should I," said Gimli. "We, of course, were only sent to help the bearer along the road, to go no further than we wished. And none of us is under any oath or command to seek Mount Doom. Hard was my parting from Lothlorien. Yet I have come so far, and I say this now. Now we have reached the last choice, it is clear to me that I cannot leave Frodo. I would choose Minas Tirith, but if he does not, then I will follow him."
Well, you've been hearing it all, Moogle. So this is sort of like reading it, right? "And I too will go with him," said Legolas. "It would be faithless now to say farewell." "It would indeed be a betrayal if we all left him," said Aragorn. "But if he goes east, then all need not go with him. Nor do I think that all should. That venture is desperate, as much so for 8 as for 3 or 2 or 1 alone. If you would let me choose, then I would appoint 3 companions, Sam, who could not bear it otherwise, and Gimli and myself. Boromir will return to his own city, where his father and his people need him, and with him the others should go, or at least Meriadoc and Peregrine, if Legolas is not willing to leave us." "That won't do at all," cried Merry. "We can't leave Frodo. Pippin and I always intended to go wherever he went, and we still do. But we did not realize what that would mean. It seemed different, so far away in the Shire or in Rivendell. It would be mad and cruel to let Frodo go to Mordor. Why can't we stop him?" "We must stop him," said Pippin, "and that is what he's worrying about, I am sure. He knows we shan't agree to his going east, and he doesn't like to ask anyone to go with him, poor old fellow." "Imagine it, going off to Mordor alone." Pippin shuddered. "But the dear silly old hobbit. He ought to know that he hasn't got to ask. He ought to know that if we can't stop him, we shan't leave him." "Begging your pardon," said Sam. "I don't think you understand my master at all. He isn't hesitating about which way to go. Of course not. What's the good of Minas Tirith anyway? To him, I mean, begging your pardon, Master Boromir," he added, and then turned. It was then that they discovered that Boromir, who at first had been sitting silent on the outside of the circle, was no longer there. "Now where's he got to?" cried Sam, looking worried. "He's been a bit queer lately, to my mind. But anyway, he's not in this business. He's off to his home, as he's always said, and no blame to him. But Mr. Frodo, he knows he's got to find the cracks of Doom if he can. But he's afraid. Now it's coming to the point. He's just plain terrified. That's what all his trouble is. Of course, he's had a bit of schooling, so to speak. We all have since we left home. Or he'd be so terrified he'd just fling the ring into the river and bolt. But he's still too frightened to start. And he isn't worrying about us either, whether we'll go along with him or no.
He knows we mean to. That's another thing that's bothering him. If he screws himself up to go, he'll want to go alone, mark my words. We're going to have trouble when he comes back, for he'll screw himself up all right, as much as his name's Baggins. I believe you speak more wisely than any of us, Sam, said Aragorn. And what shall we do if you prove right? Stop him! Don't let him go! Cried Pippin. I wonder, said Aragorn. He is the bearer, and the fate of this burden is on him. I do not think that it is our part to drive him one way or another, nor do I think that we should succeed if we tried. There are other powers at work far stronger. Well, I wish Frodo would screw himself up and come back and let us get it over, said Pippin. The waiting is horrible. Surely the time is up. Yes, said Aragorn, the hour is long past. The morning is wearing away. We must call for him. Oh, hey there, Mr. Rippus. I see you have the ring emote there. We're just about at the end of the book here. So. At that moment, Boromir reappeared. He came out from the trees and walked toward them without speaking. His face looked grim and sad. He paused as if counting those that were present, and then sat down aloof with his eyes on the ground. Where have you been, Boromir? Asked Aragorn. Have you seen Frodo? Boromir hesitated for a second. Yes and no, he answered slowly. Yes. I found him some way up the hill, and I spoke to him. I urged him to come to Minas Tirith and not to go east. I grew angry, and he left me. He vanished. I have never seen such a thing happen before, though I have heard of it in tales. He must have put the ring on. I could not find him again. I thought he would return to you. Is that all you have to say? Said Aragorn, looking hard and not too kindly at Boromir. Yes, he answered. I will say no more yet. This is bad, cried Sam, jumping up. I don't know what this man has been up to. Why should Mr. Frodo put the thing on? He didn't ought to have, and if he was, goodness knows what may have happened. But he wouldn't keep it on, said Merry, not when he'd escaped the unwelcome visitor, like Bilbo used to. But where did he go? Where is he? Cried Pippin. He's been away ages now. How long is it since you last saw Frodo? Boromir asked Aragorn. Half an hour, maybe, he answered. Or it might be an hour. I have wandered for some time since. I do not know. I do not know. He put his head in his hands, and sat as if bowed with grief. An hour since he vanished, shouted Sam. We must try to find him at once. Come on. Wait a moment, cried Aragorn. We must divide up into pairs and arrange... Here, hold on, wait! It was no good. They took no notice of him. Sam had dashed off first. Merry and Pippin had followed, and were already disappearing westward into the trees by the shore, shouting, Frodo, Frodo, in their clear, high hobbit voices. Legolas and Gimli were running. A sudden panic or madness seemed to have fallen on the company. We shall be scattered and lost, groaned Aragorn. Boromir, I do not know what part you have played in this mischief. But help now. Go after those two young hobbits and guard them at the least, even if you cannot find Frodo. Come back to this spot if you find them or any traces of him. I shall return soon. Aragorn sprang swiftly away and went in pursuit of Sam, just as he reached a little lawn among the rowans. He overtook him, toiling uphill, panting and calling Frodo. Come with me, Sam, he said. None of us should be alone. There is mischief about, I feel it. I'm going to the top, to the seat of Amon Hen, to see what may be seen. And look, it is as if my heart guessed Frodo went this way. Follow me, and keep your eyes open. He sped up the path. Sam did his best, but he could not keep up with Strider the Ranger, and soon fell behind. He had not gone far before Aragorn was out of sight ahead. Sam stopped and puffed. Suddenly he clapped his hand to his head. Whoa, Sam Gamgee, he said out loud. Your legs are too short, so use your head. Let me see now. Boromir isn't lying. That's not his way. But he hasn't told us everything. Something scared Mr. Frodo badly. He screwed himself up to the point sudden. He made up his mind at last to go. Where to? Off east. Not without Sam. Yes, even without his Sam. That's hard, cruel hard. Sam passed his hand over his eyes, brushing away the tears. Steady, Gamgee, he said. Think if you can. He can't fly across rivers, and he can't jump waterfalls. He's got no gear. So he's got to get back to the boats. Back to the boats, Sam, like lightning. Sam turned and bolted back down the path. He fell and cut his knees. Up he got and ran on. He came to the edge of the lawn of Parth Galen by the shore, where the boats were drawn up out of the water. No one was there. There seemed to be cries in the woods behind, but he did not heed them. He stood gazing for a moment, stock still, gaping. A boat was sliding down the bank all by itself. With a shout, Sam raced across the grass. The boat slipped into the water. Coming, Mr. Frodo, coming, called Sam, and flung himself from the bank, clutching at the departing boat. He missed it by a yard.
With a cry and a splash, he fell face downward into deep, swift water. Gurgling, he went under, and the river closed over his curly head. An exclamation of dismay came from the empty boat. A paddle swirled, and the boat put about. Frodo was just in time to grasp Sam by the hair as he came up, bubbling and struggling. Fear was staring in his round, brown eyes. "Up you come, Sam, my lad," said Frodo. "Now take my hand." "Save me, Mr. Frodo," gasped Sam. "I'm drownded. I can't see your hand." "Here it is. Don't pinch, lad." "I won't let you go. Tread water and don't flounder, or you'll upset the boat. There, now, get a hold of the side, and let me use the paddle." With a few strokes, Frodo brought the boat back to the bank, and Sam was able to scramble out, wet as a water rat. Frodo took off the ring and stepped ashore again. "Of all the confounded nonsenses, you are the worst, Sam," he said. "Oh, Mr. Frodo, that's hard," said Sam, shivering. "That's hard, trying to go without me and all. If I hadn't guessed right, where would you be off? Where would you be now?" "Safely on my way." "Safely," said Sam. "All alone and without me to help you?" "I couldn't have borne it if it had been the death of me." "It would be the death of you to come with me, Sam," said Frodo. "And I could not have borne that." "Not as certain as being left behind," said Sam. "But I am going to Mordor." "I know that well enough, Mr. Frodo. Of course you are, and I'm coming with you." "Now, Sam," said Frodo, "don't hinder me. The others will be coming back at any minute. If they catch me here, I shall have to argue and explain. I shall never have the heart or the chance to get off, but I must go at once. It's the only way." "Of course it is," answered Sam. "But not alone. I'm coming too, or neither of us isn't going. I'll knock holes in all the boats first." Frodo actually laughed. A sudden warmth and gladness touched his heart. "Leave one," he said. "We'll need it. But you can't come like this without your gear or food or anything." "Just hold on a moment and I'll get my stuff," cried Sam eagerly. "It's all ready. I thought we should be off today." He rushed to the camping place, fished out his pack from the pile where Frodo had laid it, when he emptied the boat on his companion's goods, grabbed the spare blanket, and some extra packages of food, and ran back. "So now my plan is spoilt," said Frodo. "It's no good trying to escape you. But I'm glad, Sam. I cannot tell you how glad. Come along. It is plain that we are meant to go together. We will go, and may the others find a safe road. Strider will look after them. I don't suppose we shall see them again." "Yet we may, Mr. Frodo. We may," said Sam. So Frodo and Sam set off on the last stage of the quest together. Frodo paddled away from the shore, and the river bore them swiftly away down the western arm, and past the frowning cliffs of Tol Brandir. The roar of the great falls drew nearer. Even with such help as Sam could give, it was hard work to pass across the current at the southward end of the island, and drive the boat eastward toward the far shore. At length they came to land again upon the southern slopes of Amon Law. There they found a shelving shore, and they drew the boat out high above the water and hid it as well as they could behind a great boulder. Then, shouldering their burdens, they set off, seeking a path that would bring them over the grey hills of the Emyn Muil and down into the Land of Shadow. Here ends the first part of the history of the War of the Ring. The second part is called The Two Towers, since the events recounted in it are dominated by Orthanc, the citadel of Saruman, and the fortress of Minas Morgul that guards the secret entrance to Mordor. It tells of the deeds and perils of all the members of the now sundered fellowship until the coming of the great darkness. The third part tells us of the last defense against the shadow, and the end of the mission of the Ring-Bearer in the return of the king. That's the Fellowship of the Ring. That note at the end is interesting because it's kind of wrong. Tolkien here mentions that the second part is called The Two Towers, and that it's called so because there's Minas Morgul and Orthanc. However, it mentions that Minas Morgul guards the secret entrance to Mordor, but we know that the tower that guards the secret entrance to Mordor is called Cirith Ungol. I think that Tolkien wrote that when he had a different idea, and then he changed his mind a little bit later. But he actually didn't like the title, The Two Towers. He didn't like any of the titles that were used. He liked the Fellowship of the Ring enough, although that's not the title that he had come up with. The second part, he wanted to call it The Treason of Isengard, and he had a few other ideas. It was actually his publisher that... Yes, that one Chasm Stream? Wait, what about Suikoden 2 Moogle? thought about Suikoden too. But he didn't like the two towers. The publisher came up with that idea, and he wondered to himself, which two towers? There are like 5 towers that it could be. Minas Tirith, Minas Morgul, Cirith Ungol, Orthanc, Barad-dûr. I mean, there's all these different... Which two towers are they talking about? He never liked that title. He didn't like The Return of the King either, because he felt that it was a spoiler. It gave away too much right there in the title. He wanted to call it, The War of the Ring. But anyway, so now notice that, like, if you're familiar with the film version, the Peter Jackson versions, you're like, wait a minute, that's the end of the book? What about Boromir dying and all that stuff? That happens in the Two Towers. And it's really interesting because I was watching the movies with some people not very long ago. It was like a year and a half ago or so. And I said, the end of this movie is really the beginning of the Two Towers. And then a lot of the parts of the Return of the King film are actually from the Two Towers, because it's not until after they deal with Shelob and actually get into Mordor itself that the Return of the King begins. And that actually happens like halfway through the Return of the King. So it's kind of wild how the Two Towers is stretched across 3 films like that. But that's just the way that it went, because... Peter Jackson had the idea that, not so much happens with Frodo and Sam in The Return of the King, which I don't agree with him, but I understand where he's coming from, so he wanted to add a lot of the stuff from the end of the Two Towers into that film. And plus, he was showing things sequentially, which Tolkien does not do. Now, you notice that there's a little bit of this here where we get to where the story follows Frodo, and then he has his whole argument with Boromir. Boromir loses it, and then Frodo runs off to the Seat of Seeing. He contends with Sauron. And then he decides to leave on his own. And then it dials it back to Sam and Merry and Pippin and Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas talking, realizing that Boromir's not there. Boromir comes back. So it sort of rewinds time, and we're going to see that to great effect in the Two Towers, because the first half of the book, Book 3, follows Aragorn as the primary character. And then Book 4, the second half of the Two Towers, follows Frodo as the primary character. So we're gonna see that a lot. And then in The Return of the King, it's sort of split all over the place, because there's parts that follow Merry, there's parts that follow Pippin, there's parts that follow Frodo, and such and such and such. But anyway, thank you guys for coming by. Thank you everybody that's watching on Twitch. Thank you to everybody that's watching on YouTube as well. We have a lot of people here today, and I want to thank you for coming by. And we actually did finish it, so the next time that we do a reading stream, it will be the Two Towers. Next week there will not be a stream on Thursday. Well, I will be streaming on Twitch, but we're going to be doing the List Critics Remastered podcast. That will not be a YouTube stream. So the next YouTube stream is going to be in 2 weeks on the 5th of June, and it is going to be the Council of Tolkien with me and Sid and Matt. And then as for the other Thursdays, the 12th and the 19th, we'll be streaming on both days. I will let you guys know which is going to be the Two Towers and which is going to be perhaps playing The Hobbit. Keep an eye on the community tab, or if you're on the Discord, keep an eye on that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask that my moderators on both sides, could you pop some Discord invites into the chat if you can. But we're going to go ahead and end the stream in just a moment. For those of you watching on Twitch who want to watch the gaming streams, there will be, of course, every day we'll be streaming. Tomorrow I'll be playing Final Fantasy IV, and Saturday Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Sunday Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, and from then on Ultra Street Fighter 4, all that stuff. All the stuff that you guys are used to. Of course, the streaming schedule is also on the Discord. But Moogle, if you could get a Discord invite on the Twitch side of things. And I don't know if Alice is still there, but anybody on YouTube, if you look at the stream, there's a description of... Thank you, Moogle. There's a description... do I have an invite in there? Oh, I don't, actually. All right. I'll get you guys a Discord invite. One moment. I don't think Alice is there right now. Let me go ahead and grab one for you guys. I think I can do it, even though I'm in streamer mode. I'll just take myself out of streamer mode because we're about to end. Okay, so let me grab you guys an invite. for anybody that wants to join. Oh, that's not the button to do that. Let's see. Invite people. All right, I'm going to pop a Discord invite into the YouTube chat as well. So there it is right there. I thank you guys for coming by. We are going to end stream. Like I said, we had at one point 90 people in the chat on both platforms. It's absolutely amazing. So I look forward to doing more of this. Like I said, next Thursday, I'm not going to be here on YouTube. I will be on Twitch doing the List Critics. But I'll say goodbye for now.